Good morning, committee. Let's get things underway. We're all set with our Zooming capability, et cetera. Welcome, everyone, to Joint Transportation and Military Affairs. As we begin our interim work, it's good to see everybody. Really enjoyed yesterday, committee. Most of us, almost all of us, traveled up to Buffalo and had an opportunity to check in on the Skilled Nursing Center. Very impressive work going on. A lot of work left to be done, that's for sure, but that facility is going to take wonderful care of our veterans one of these days soon. And so we learned a great deal there. And then we traveled down, and I wanted to especially tip the Stetson hat to Representative McGuire, who I thought hit a real big home run. Really appreciated the Natrona County International Airport Board for stepping up, and the manager of the airport, along with our museum staff and volunteers. And so, Joe, thank you for everything you did last night. That was it was educational, it was entertaining, and it was very informative. And so really appreciated that very much. By the way, welcome to the Thyra Thompson State Office Building. Some of you, I don't think, have had an opportunity to be in this building, and Senator Anderson and myself and a couple of other legislators served on the task force for the last couple of years. Kind of our task was to work side by side with the executive branch and with the city of Casper and others to get this thing put on the ground. And I think it too was a home run. Really proud of this facility, and so glad that we had the foresight. This was to be a shell, frankly. This third floor of this building was not to have anything on it or in it on this western wing, but the more we talked about the Chancery Court, et cetera, some other things, we decided to try to go ahead with this, and we're sitting in one of the reasons that we thought we should go ahead and build this thing out. It came in on time, well under budget. It will return multiple millions of dollars back to the general fund on this facility, so we're really proud of it. So with all of that, Heather, would you take roll for us? One of the Heathers. How about that?
Senator Anderson?
Here.
Senator Furphy?
Here.
Senator McEwen?
Here.
Senator Pappas?
Here.
Representative Baker?
Here.
Representative Burt?
Here.
Representative Henderson?
Here.
Representative McGuire?
Here.
Representative Obermuller?
Here.
Representative O'Hearn?
Here.
Representative Romero Martinez?
Excused.
Representative Stivar?
Present.
Co-Chairman Landon?
Here.
Co-Chairman Burkhart?
Here. Okay, thank you very much, Heather. Mr. Co-Chairman, how about we start off with any comments or directives you might have this morning?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things, just to remind the people of our decorum. Please address the chair. Please keep those side conversations down, and for everyone, stay on topic. And that issue came up this morning about attendance, and especially in the House side, as we've said before, you have to be here physically at the meeting. We're not going to do any Zoom attendance or virtual attendance for these meetings. If you're ill, you're ill. Go get better. There may be extenuating circumstances, but generally that's the rule we've talked about in the past, and we'll continue with that. One thing too for the agencies and that and anyone participating, when you look at our schedule, it's a fairly robust schedule. However, some things may end sooner than they appear on the schedule. So for those who are listening and wonder when they will be up to testify, you might want to be here a little earlier than what the time says, just so you're here, because we will not wait for you. If you look at the schedule, we're going to 6 this evening. We start at 8 tomorrow and go to 5. There's a lot of work to be done, so just be prepared. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good reminders, Mr. Co-Chairman. Thank you very much. Committee, I want to drop back to the session real quickly and just congratulate all of you on what I thought was a very, very successful session, and successful especially, I think, for Transportation and Military Affairs. We got some good things done in the previous interim, and all of you, I think, stepped up and worked hard for some of the things that we represented for this constituency. And so we begin our work again this interim to see what we can do. This morning, we're going to check in with the general and his folks and see what we can do on the military front. So with that, let's launch in and get going with our work. General, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I think I just wanted to first start off with, to echo Senator Landon's, Chairman Landon's appreciation to all of you for the time it took yesterday to go up to skilled nursing and our event last night. Representative McGuire, thank you very much for taking the lead on that and continue to share your vision with us on what that could be. Obviously, it's something near and dear to the military's heart, and thanks to all of you for being part of it. And it was just good to see all of you again without masks and in person and see everybody. So Tim, also wanted to thank you and your team there. Did a great job setting this up. That doesn't happen in a vacuum, so thank you too. Please pass that to the team. Ladies or gentlemen, please, looks like we may have a little bit of a problem getting our slides up, but if I could refer you to our slide deck, we'll walk through and begin immediately if we can do that. All right. Hey, before we start, for the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter. I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. I do have a couple of new folks with me that I wanted to introduce. In the back here is Major Dan Johnson. Dan is going to replace Major Maury as the Executive Officer and Legislative Liaison. Major Maury is moving on to another position of greater responsibility, and you'll hear from her today, but this will probably be one of the last opportunities you'll get to see her for a little while anyway. But I did want to, in front of the committee, thank Major Maury for her outstanding work. Also, I think, although I think everybody knows Major Karen Hinkle, I want to make sure that we introduce her as well. She's the 153rd Staff Judge Advocate, and she'll be presenting with us today. I think everybody knows Chief Moore, and then the folks up here will introduce themselves as they come up, but I think that's the team today. All right.
So, General, it's nice that you've got the backup at the back of the room. They played a big role during the session, so thank you all for all the work that everyone did out there too. So
yes, sir. There's a lot of talent.
Continue.
Yes, sir. There's a lot of talent back there, and we'll continue
Co-Chairman.
to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a quick, my thank you to Major Maury. As you know, she has really done a job for you with the committee, with me,
Yes, sir.
and that. So, Major Maury, from me, good luck, and that, enjoy your new position, and that, thank you. So, and Major, I need your phone numbers.
No pressure there, Major.
No.
Okay, General, back to you.
All right, sir, if we could go to page 2, you'll see it's marked as the agenda. I'm going to spend a brief few minutes just giving you an update of what's going on in the Wyoming Military Department, and then we'll move through the interim study topics. We will have several different folks briefing you today. I appreciate the committee's willingness to allow that. It is great training and great development for our young men and women who are doing this. All right, let's move over to page 3 if we could. Let me give you a quick update on COVID vaccines. Let me start with the Air Guard. We've got about 90% of airmen fully vaccinated. 5 are currently in the process. There's a couple of medical exemptions that we're working through, and there's 64 seeking a religious accommodation. We did transfer 13 to the individual ready reserve. What that means is they elected not to take the vaccination, and because they had a remaining military service obligation, they had to go into the ready reserve. So we transferred 13 of those folks, and then we honorably discharged 11. Big impact to us. We can account for sure there's been at least 41 young men and women who have elected not to join the Air National Guard because of the vaccination requirement that we'll see. And as we continue to talk, you'll see that as a theme today. My concern about strength and attracting our young men and women to serve in the military forces writ large, but most importantly in the Wyoming National Guard. For the Army National Guard, we've got about 1,100 fully vaccinated, almost 75%. They've got a little bit longer suspense date. They have until the 30th of June before they're required to take their to be fully vaccinated. The Air National Guard was, back in December was their deadline. We've got 105 that are currently in progress, 9 doing medical exemptions. We had 64 seeking a religious exemption, and there are 76 currently that are refusing the vaccination. We can count at least 19 soldiers that have not joined the National Guard because they do not want to take the vaccination. I think that's a real quick heads up on vaccinations. Any questions before we move to slide 4?
Questions thus far, committee, anything? Representative O'Hearn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will the vaccines always be a requirement? Mr. or General?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative O'Hearn, I would say, always is a long time. I tell you, for the foreseeable future, I don't see it changing. And we'll see where, as this thing develops, as you can, the amount of information that's changed since we had COVID, and I probably wouldn't speculate always, but at least for the next 18 months to 2 years, I foresee that being a requirement.
So, General, I've got a follow-up to that one. Normally, through the public school system and other things earlier in life, we take care of other vaccinations, but are there other vaccinations that we require of our military force?
Mr. Chairman, yes, that's correct. Approximately 14 vaccinations required when individuals first get into basic training or basic, either on the Army or the air side. And then depending on where you deploy and what area you go, there could be additional vaccinations like yellow fever or those kind of things. So quite a few vaccinations.
So the COVID vaccination is just one of many that is expected. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for that clarification. Appreciate it. Anything else, committee? Okay, please continue.
All right. If we slip over to page 4, really quickly, the deployments and missions. Got about 28 Air Guard folks out deployed right now, and they are scattered all over the globe. 4 of the air traffic control companies in AFRICOM through July. We've got about 18 aeromedical evacuation squadron folks all over the place. They probably deployed in teams of 3 and 4 out through AFRICOM, UCOM, NORTHCOM, and Central Command. Security Forces is in Central Command through October. 3 flight crews are about ready to go out to AFRICOM with the Montana Air National Guard. And then we've got a civil engineering squadron member going to SouthCom for 6 months in July. So still pretty, not overly busy, but still a lot of folks deploying out there to support the combatant commands across the globe. Army deployments, really nothing right now, but we are spinning about 28 to 30 soldiers to deploy to Central Command here in June. We just had their Yellow Ribbon event last Friday, and it'll be 2 Blackhawks with associated crews. They're actually going as part of a Combat Aviation Brigade, a CAB, a couple different states, Arkansas, New York, California, quite a bit of folks. They'll head to Fort Hood in June, spend about a month there. Then they'll move over to Fort Sill to finish up some of their combined arms training, and then deploy into theater probably in the August timeframe. That'll be a 9-month rotation. Once they're on the ground, it'll be about a year total once it's all said and done. So still doing a lot of training in preparation for that. They're currently on orders right now, and we'll have them for another probably 30 days before we turn them loose and they go on. Joint staff doing a lot of preparation for wildfires, floods, that sort of thing. Floods, we're not seeing too much opportunity to do that, probably regrettably, but wildfires is certainly an issue, and probably I'll talk a little bit more of that a little later.
So, General, if I could stop you real quickly and back up to deployments and missions. The big elephant in the room is the fact that we've got a major conflict going on in the world, and I wonder if you could share with the committee any observations you have with respect to how might that impact Wyoming's Guard, Wyoming's Air Guard, whatever. What are you hearing, and what can you share with us?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think right now what I could foresee is there's going to have to be a decision made in the next few months about what the United States is going to do in terms of forward presence into Europe and the United States in EUCOM. My guess, my observation is we'll probably start to have forward forces there for a while, depending the way as a hedge against what Russia continues to do. So the active component, there's simply not enough of them to continue to do that mission, plus modernize as the Chief of Staff and the Secretary of Defense would like to do. There's quite a bit of modernization actions going on in the Army. That's major weapon systems being redone. So I can certainly see where the National Guard and the reserves are going to have to start taking a role and rotate as divisions into EUCOM. The National Guard has 8 divisions in its in our formations. We have a couple of units that are traced to the division, mostly the 40th out of California, but the brigade is aligned to the 34th out of Minnesota. I can see that eventually that could get us hooked into being part of a rotation. There's been nothing though that's come out of what that looks like, and I don't think any decisions have been made yet about what that division looks like. But if I were to guess, I would say that we're going to start seeing rotations again, and that will affect us as we go into EUCOM.
General, thanks for that, and I won't spend too much time, but do you anticipate that some of that might be humanitarian in places like Belgium and Poland, and the impacts of that conflict in Europe?
Yeah.
More than likely, I think that's probably more likely than sending anyone to a battlefront somewhere. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's certainly true. Non-combatant evacuation operations is something that the EUCOM is planning a lot right now on what they're doing. So there's plenty of work to be done over there that's just going to take formations on the ground to do that, whether that's combat operations or evacuation operations or anything along those lines. So it's going to take people.
Thanks for pausing on that.
Yes, sir.
Committee, anything? Okay, please proceed.
Yes,
Thanks.
sir. I think while I'm there, I'll talk a little bit about Southwest Border. It looks like the administration will have another Southwest Border mission. There was about 3,000 guardsmen last year on Title 10 orders on involuntary mobilization. They have not selected units this year as of yet, but I suspect for that to come out soon. I have no indication that any of Wyoming units will do Southwest Border support. We don't have some of the equipment that they're looking for, and right now I've had no heads up that we may go to the border and participate in any of those missions. Joint Staff, we're going to do African Lion. It's a rather large exercise there between Morocco and Tunisia, and so the civil support team's going over there, and we'll send the 133rd there next year, and we've got some members of our Joint Staff. Joint Staff also just got back from Alaska with Arctic Eagle, doing some work with the folks up there, again, to hedge on some of the interest by our adversaries in the Arctic, which becomes larger and larger all the time. All right, maybe we flip over to page 5. Just wanted to give you a quick sort of overview of some of the projects. Air National Guard, we broke ground on the new Security Forces building in the Combined Arms Training Center, $5.7 million on the Security Forces building and $4.8 on the maintenance building. We're going through the what they call the AIDS, the Vehicle Maintenance and Ground Equipment. Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
General, just a quick question. The new Security Forces building, where's that at?
It is right there, Mr. Chairman. It is right there on the base there at the National Guard.
Thank you.
Yeah, right there. The VMH is probably our next one that we're trying to get done. It's scheduled to come to us this year. We're a little bit of a victim of the supply chain and the inflation prices right now. We are still trying to get that design sort of condensed a little bit in order to meet the money that they gave us. So we may wind up giving up a little capability from the original design, just because the prices have just gone up so much. So they're working through that right now. I'm a little concerned about it because we have to spend that money this year, and it's just a little bit of friction right now as we try to get the A&E design folks and our folks to get us a building that meets what we need within the price range that we can afford.
And General, that's the building there in Cheyenne, right?
Yes, sir. It's also on the Air National Guard base as well.
Okay.
Army Guard, we're hosting the Regional Best Warrior Competition. So each state provides a best warrior and they compete with one another. It ultimately ends in a national competition and we have a best warrior. Last year, our folks made it all the way through the regional to the finals. That didn't win, but did a great job. And we'll host the region here out west at Guernsey here this next weekend, the weekend after Mother's Day. We do, some of you may have heard about the Sheridan Vehicle Maintenance Facility. Right now, we're in the process of working with the county and city of Sheridan and the college to acquire some land over there just east of I-90, east of the Armory to put the vehicle maintenance facility on. So we're in a bit of a fast track to do that. If we aren't able to make that happen, we'll have to put that vehicle maintenance facility right behind the Readiness Center there in Sheridan. A little tight if we do that, and that's not something that Sheridan College would like to see. They would like to have that property eventually, and so we're working through the process right now to see if we can't do a long-term lease with them, with the hopes that we'll swap at some point. That they'll get that Sheridan Armory property and we'll move completely out to that 21 acres that they have for us. But that's a long timeline. 25 years or so is what I'm guessing. Joint staff really doing a lot of preparation for fire season. We're about 5 times more likely this year to experience fire than we have been in past years. We spent a lot of time doing tabletop exercises, rehearsing, working with the county partners, particularly in Guernsey, to make sure that we respond quickly and don't let any fires jump off of the boundaries of Guernsey. I can't tell you, that's how strong we feel about not doing that to our neighbors. And we spent a lot of time, effort, and energy this year rehearsing and making sure that we can react to it very quickly. The Vets Commission, Tim kick me in bounds if I don't, if I get this wrong. 12 commissioners are in place. They're going to have a meeting here on the 10th of May, and Tim can certainly jump in if you need that. Keeney Foundation has really done a great job in supporting us with their food grants, and that $2.7 million upgrade that we received last year to do some more work on the columbariums and do some expansion is on track. Tim, anything you'd add?
Director Shepard, before you offer any comments this morning, thanks for all of your involvement the last day or two, to help set things up and coordinate and work. Appreciate all you've done for the veterans, so take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. And I am Tim Shepard, the Executive Director for the Wyoming Veterans Commission. Pleasure to be here this morning. One thing that General Porter skipped over that I wanted to go back to was not only did the Keeney Foundation help us with our food insecurity program, and just as a quick refresher on that, that's a program where if a veteran is having a hard time, it doesn't matter, they can't pay their rent, they're struggling with their utilities, can't put gas in the car, we say, hey, let us help you with a food card. And that food card for an individual veteran is good for $150. And for a veteran with dependents, it's good for $250 at a local grocery store. And so it's just it's not a lot of money, but if you're struggling to make ends meet, it can really make a difference. And we've seen where not only does it make a difference to help the veteran in the short run, but we also then open up a dialogue with those veterans. And lots of times we find, they're really not taking advantage of all of the benefits that they have available to them. So we're able to embrace them, sit them down. In a lot of cases, it turns out specifically their VA claim isn't what it should have been or should be. And so we're able then to help them refile or in some cases file a claim for the first time. and that can make a huge difference in their lives. But we also talk to them about food and what's available in the community, and we work with Sensible Nutrition to help them understand how do you take a $150 food card and make it stretch to something maybe more like $250 or $300, and how do you just do that in your life? So it's a kind of a life coaching thing that we use as well. But the other thing that the Keeney Foundation helped us with was the burial stipend. And if you'll remember, last year, to meet the governor's request for a 10% cut in our budget, we actually cut the burial stipend. I learned from the veteran community, they really appreciate that stipend. And yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. No. Oh, I'm sorry. They appreciate that stipend, and it does make a difference when we're talking that end-of-life ceremony, and to make sure that we're showing our veterans and their loved ones the proper dignity in that final moment. So, long story short, the Keeney Foundation agreed to fund that program. You will see us come back in the next budget and look to put that back into our operating budget. But for now, we do have the stipend, and we're able to support burial teams around the state.
Director Shepard, where's the Keeney Foundation located? Where's home base for them? What can you tell me about that foundation?
There's a web page. You know, they're in the northeast corner. They generally handle the 5 counties in the northeast corner of the state.
Oh, okay.
But they have done well and asked, you know, was there something that we might want statewide? And so we went ahead and submitted the 2 grant requests, and were successful with both efforts.
Thank you for that. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I can shed some light on the Keeney Foundation. She's a lady out of Gillette
Gillette, okay.
that had a little mineral wealth, or quite a little mineral wealth, and formed this foundation. And Jack Tarter used to run it. I don't know if he still does. He doesn't. But she's, I forget her first name. It's something like Mona Keeney or something like that.
Mr. Chairman, Marna
Keeney. Marna Keeney. And she's all about veterans, and she runs the foundation.
Well, Director and Senator, thanks for that. I was not aware of that, and it's good to know where that base is, and I know the rest of the committee joins me in thanking that foundation, so that's terrific. Please proceed. Oh, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shepard, on the food insecurity amount, that fund itself, not just the grant received, how is it financially? Is it financially stable?
Mr. Chairman,
You need more money, or do you have enough? Let's put it that way.
today we have enough money. Tomorrow, now I will tell you that this all started with a grant from the Bob Woodruff Foundation. Started with $2,500, and then we received $5,000, and then a $10,000, and another $10,000. And then we actually received support through the Wyoming Hunger Initiative from the Starks, Dan and Cynthia, out of Du Bois, who actually have been so generous as to donate $15,000. So we've been able to find donors, whether it's a direct donor. We also have had some individuals donate to our trust fund, and we have said, hey, we'll use that money specifically for food insecurity. So right now we're in a pretty good place. I just did do another grant request to the Bob Woodruff Foundation. So my fingers crossed, we'll receive another $10,000. But down the road, for sustainability, the thing I worry about, and I think this is where you're headed, is we can have gaps in that program. And when we have a gap, it's amazing how that word spreads, and suddenly we don't have any money, and the program's dead. And so we work really hard not to get to that point because we don't want to have to do these restarts because we really lose a lot of momentum. So we do try to stay ahead on the funding game.
Co-chairman? Okay. Representative, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shepard, are you guys working with Veterans Rock like they're in Cheyenne?
Mr. Chairman, for you, through you for the representative, yes, we do. We work very closely with Veterans Rock. And that's a resource, one of the resources that we use when we talk to a veteran about, hey, here's what else is available in the community, and specific to Cheyenne. Veterans Rock is a great outlet. They have clothing, they have furniture, they've actually purchased a vehicle for a veteran, they have food, so it's a great resource. Work real close with Cindy and Bob.
Representative Stivar, any follow-up? Thank you for that question. Good. Mr. Co-chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't want to violate our own rule about getting off site here, so I'll just raise the issue and I'll talk to Mr. Shepard later, which is, I've heard a rumor they plan to close the VA clinic in Rollins, so we can take that offline later if you wait a few minutes before you leave.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yep.
So Director Shepard, I assume on this front that you rely on all sorts of sources to identify any of our veterans out there who need some help. Is that correct?
That's a great question, Mr. Chairman, and that circle has really grown since the start of the program. Initially, it was our service officers and our commissioners. And then we expanded it to the veteran service organizations, specifically Legion, DAV, and VFW. Another group that's come on that has been just huge is Volunteers of America, because they work low rent properties for veterans, basically veterans who are or about to be homeless. They can help them. Well, if they're about to be homeless, they probably have food insecurity as well. So we get a lot of referrals now through the VOA. And the circle just continues to grow. Veterans Rock, we received 22 requests from Veterans Rock at one point. So we keep our fingers out there. We do try to validate that, hey, you do have a 214, you have some service record, you did serve less than dishonorably, we'll help you.
You know, I was sitting here thinking about the motorcycle riders. We've got some great groups around that come in contact with our veterans all the time. So thanks for that. Appreciate it. Please proceed.
You bet, Mr. Chairman. Are we down to WCCA?
I think so. There should be nothing left for you to say. Yes, so just really quickly, Wyoming Cowboy Challenge, we'll be doing our graduation of Class 45 on the 10th of June. We should have invites to everybody out on that pretty shortly. Camp Guernsey, as I said, really focusing on, we got a little bit slower training season this year compared to last year. We're just not mobilizing as many federal forces as we've done in the past. We did, I believe the committee remembers, we did get 2 new barracks for Camp Guernsey and an ammunition supply point that are 100% federal funds that we're going to put on that place. Range management, we had 40,000 deposited in the grazing account with about just short of 17,000 dispersed. We did have one of our leases, though, declare bankruptcy. Had a good chunk of our leases in the North Training area. So we're going to rebid those leases, 6 of those, with the intent, hopefully, to get those leased and ready to go by July. They'll only be for 5 years. Normally, those leases are 10 years, so we'll just, it's been 5 years since we granted the leases last time, so this will be a 5-year, and then we'll do it again. So still working through some of the grazing issues on that one.
Committee, anything on projects and events? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, we kind of skipped over the State Veterans Cemetery with a 2.7 million upgrade, and probably because it's a VA grant, I guess, I don't know. But is that ongoing or started yet, or?
Thank you,
Shepard?
Mr. Chairman. For the senator, it is ongoing. We're about to turn dirt. I do have a handout for each member of the committee that goes through the specific points of what we'll upgrade as a result of that $2.7 million.
And Mr. Chairman, that's just a 2.7 million grant from the feds. It's not state money. There's no state match or anything like that.
That's correct.
Director Shepard, on that regard, at the Oregon Trail Cemetery, just wanted to thank you again for all the work that we did over the past several months to finally allow for the town of Evansville a road that is south of the Oregon Trail Cemetery. And honestly, if you haven't been on that road committee, it's one that cuts across and gives a second exit point for that community. Big deal for that community. And it wouldn't have happened, Director Shepard, without your help. So thank you for that. We worked probably 7 or 8 years on that, and it works. And it really did not, I think, have any impact on the cemetery up there. So
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I will add, and I did have the opportunity to share this with you last night, but I think, I really do believe that was a win-win. I think the community really won by the road being there. I think we won in that it really forced us to work closely with the town of Evansville. Our relationship with the town of Evansville is better than it's been as long as I've been involved with the military department. We communicate, we coordinate, and we get things done. And I know they are very appreciative of that facility, and we're appreciative of the town. So I just see it continuing to grow.
thank you for that, Director. Anything else? Okay, please proceed, General.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really two final topics that aren't on this set of slides that I wanted to bring you up to date on. First one is C130J Modernization. C130J is the new aircraft that would replace our current H models, H3s. We're a little surprised, happily surprised to see that the National Defense Authorization Act put 2020 C-130Js into the reserve components. 4 of those go into the reserves and the 16 going to the National Guard. That's 2 wings worth. Right now, the National Guard and the Air Force are trying to figure out where and how they're going to station those particular C-130Js. So we're pretty involved in that discussion right now. Obviously, we'd like to have them in Wyoming. It makes a lot of sense for a lot of different reasons. California, who shares our MAFS mission with us, the Mobile Airborne Firefighting System, they're in a J model. Reno, Nevada, and us are the other 2 National Guard wings. We're in H's. We can't rainbow cruise. We can't share equipment between the 2 platforms. The J's a little bit longer than the H3s, so it's a little bit of a pain. So we're trying to leverage that as we look at stationing. So it's on a pretty quick track to put those, and I'll keep the committee updated as we continue to walk through that. We did brief the congressional staff last Friday on it. The governor's tracking. Our folks in DC are tracking. So I think we've got a pretty good full court press. We'll see how it shakes out.
Boy, General, no question that this fire mitigation stuff in the western part of the United States is huge. I mean, it's just so big. And last night, looking down at Representative McGuire, but we learned quite a little bit about some potential here at the Natrona County International Airport on that front. So it's a multifaceted policy issue for the West, that's for sure.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Anderson.
if you get J's, will you get all replacement in J's, or will you have to train for H's and J's?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I think they would replace the entire wing with J models. It's not a good idea to try to be training for the two missions. So that would be my intent.
Okay.
All right.
General.
Hey, the last one, I'm going to plow some ground ahead of Major Hinkle's discussion just on strength, and wanted to talk to you a little bit about strength. I'm very concerned about it in the Wyoming National Guard and frankly nationwide. If you recall, when I've briefed you in the past, it's been the #1 priority of the military department, And we're making some pretty good progress on it. Army was about 100 and a little over 100% 18 months ago. The air had some really nice growth they grew about 4% to 94% about a year ago. Since that time, though, with the combination of COVID and what we'll call a lack of propensity to serve, our strength is starting to come down. As of this morning, the air was at 90% strength. We still have some of those COVID discharges that are still waiting out there. The Army's at about 95, a little over 95% strength, but if you recall the numbers, if we lose the folks from the religious accommodation, we'll be down at 90% as well. That is a big hit to us as we continue to go forward. A generational hit almost. It will take us a while to recover that much if something doesn't change in our society, in the way we look at, in the way we recruit our folks. A lot of factors play into that. Right now, we're seeing about 14% of males want to join the military, about 5% of females. Over half of America's parents would discourage their folks from joining the military. The competitive advantage of the military has been education. You know, with the GI Bill, we educated generations, but that's slowly being eroded because everybody is in search of talent now. Starbucks is offering scholarships, Walmart, McDonald's. There's a lot encroaching into that area. So it's a fairly significant problem that I'm losing a little sleep about. You'll see some discussion we have today about trying to help us with recruiting, but I'm a little bit concerned. You know, nationwide, every service has pretty much said that they will not meet their strength objectives. Army's already said that, Air Force has said that, Navy. Wyoming so far this year has had about only 177 enlistments into the Department of Defense writ large. We, as the National Guard, we've probably got about a little over 40% of that. So that's good. Our market share is good, but there's just simply people not going. In order for the Wyoming Army National Guard to meet that mission, we would have had to have, every one of those 177 would have had to come to the Army Guard. So it's just becoming harder and harder to recruit right now, and we're spending a lot of time, effort, and energy on it. So that's probably what I'll end on, that happy note to the committee. And before I turn it over to Colonel Shepard, but can I?
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Pappas?
Yeah, just one question, General. The issues with recruiting, is it even force-wide, or is it in the enlisted ranks or the officer rank more or less? Can you kind of shed some light on that?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, you know, my sense is it's mostly at bringing young men and women in. I have not seen it impact the officer population yet, much about that, but I haven't put a lot of focus onto that one yet. So far, we're getting the amount of officers we need at this point. But I would have told you that about enlisted folks about a year ago. We were doing pretty well. So that can turn pretty quickly. But my sense is it's the young men and women that are making that choice.
Mr. Chairman, and the reason I ask is because I know, at least in Cheyenne, I know a handful of folks in the active component that are looking to get out, but they're all officers, and so I didn't know if that would be something we'd want to try to focus on.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'll get with you after this, Senator Pappas, get some names from you.
This is a line item on our agenda, everyone, and before we launch into a discussion of that, I just wanted to let the public know out there that we will allow for some public comment on our military issues. I'm inclined to finish up what conversation we might want to have about recruitment and retention. Appreciate that, General. That's an issue, and it's something I think that we owe it to ourselves to dig a little bit deeper on this committee. The retention piece, the co-chairman and I have visited a little bit. General, I'm sure that you folks have done the same, and I'd be interested in what thoughts you might have as to what might you suggest to us that if you want to go ahead and launch into that, we'd appreciate it.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could, sir, I think we've got a really quick update on the skilled nursing facility, and then we'll go through the topics and get after that. And if it pleases the chairman, anything left over, we'll scoop up and have that discussion.
All right, Mr. Chairman. So I know that all of the committee wasn't able to join us at the skilled nursing facility yesterday, but for those who were, thank you again. I think that was a great experience. I'd love to see those, all three of the facility, or the cottages coming together, and I think we're on track. We now say substantial completion 27 August. I think we're going to get there. So fingers crossed. Everybody I talked to yesterday gave me the north-south that yes, we can do that. So I think we're there, and we'll look at a grand opening dedication on or about 15 September for the facility. So if you're going through the slides, the first one is the same slide I've shown before, the facade that also shows the substantial completion. The next one is the site plan, which shows the three cottages and then has superimposed the image for a potential fourth cottage, which maybe down the road that could go there, or potentially something to the western side of the state. But just food for thought. And then there's a couple of photographs, 29 November, what the site looked like, and then on 4 April, obviously for those of you who were there yesterday, you see that we're even further along than that. The last slide is
Got a question from Senator Anderson, real quickly.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, just looking at those two pictures, in 5 months, and of course it's over the winter, it doesn't look like a whole lot of change. They got some rafters up and got started on the roofs, but I don't see much done, actually.
So I think that's somewhat, Mr. Chairman, for the senator, I think that's somewhat deceiving. A lot of what's been done is the interior work on Cottage 3 and Cottage 2. Cottage 1 was definitely behind, and we did have an issue with the framers that has kind of put that back. And Cottage 1 is the one that you see that's the least far along.
Okay, thank you. Please, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not really a question, but for those who might be listening on YouTube and that, the committee toured the facility yesterday. There were a lot of requests from people who wanted to join that tour, which we weren't able to accommodate. It's an active construction site, and we have those issues, plus limiting the number of people so we don't disrupt construction. We want this done as soon as possible. So for those listening, the committee had a great tour. Mr. Shepard is filling us in on what we saw for those who couldn't attend. But just wanted to let people know out there that we really didn't want to deny anybody part of that tour. However, we had to because of the logistics of doing it. So thank you.
Appreciate that, Mr. Co-Chairman. Appreciate you reminding the public what was up yesterday, and please continue with your thoughts, Director. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the last slide really is about staffing. Just so I think this is really the long pole in the tent for when do we actually have patients in the facility is going to be based on when can we have it manned. We did hear yesterday from Mr. Bruce Allison, the director, of some, I think, really creative ways that they believe they can help fill some of those positions up there by doing some on-site training and offering programs right there at the veterans home that can help develop the staff for the future of the skilled nursing facility.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned with the staffing. I think they were talking mostly about CNAs, but there's doctors and nurses also that have to be hired. One of the things that Department of Health furnished us in the past was a listing of all the people that they were going to have to hire and how many they hired. I didn't see that in this presentation. Is there some way we can get that from the Department of Health on the text or a email or something so that we could look at that?
Mr. Chairman, for the senator, absolutely. We'll have that updated and get that to the committee.
Okay, thank you, Director, appreciate it. Anything else, committee? Okay, thank you, Director. Any other thoughts on the skilled nursing facility?
Well, if I could, sir, I would like to talk about the museum for just a second. If there are no other questions on skilled nursing and the general will allow me.
Yeah, perfect, take it away.
I just, again, wanted to do a shout out to the committee, well, one, for joining us at skilled nursing, and then for those who were able to be at the museum last night for what I thought was just a super event. And I really want to thank Representative McGuire. This was really an undertaking of his and the friends of the museum, along with Mr. Woodward and his staff. And I thought it was a great event. I really enjoyed the tour. Had the opportunity to visit with some folks I haven't had a chance to visit with before. Saw more people in the museum than I've ever seen at one time, which was awesome. And I hope that those who were there walked away agreeing with myself and Representative McGuire that really is a gem of the West that not too many people get to see on a regular basis, and we would love to see more take advantage of that museum.
Director, I agree with everything you said. At this point, I don't know that the museum is as prominent as it should be, and that might be a challenge of ours to see what we can do to remind people that it's there. It's really a remarkable facility, and every time I walk in there, I'm just reminded of the amazing history of that place. Those murals that alone is worth a visit right there. And it just takes you right back to the 1940s when all of those servicemen and women were out there. And anyway, what a great night and a good reminder. And again, appreciate the representative and all the work he did to help put that together. So, committee, anything? All right, thank you, Director Shepard, appreciate it. General,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
back to you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I think we'll start through the interim topics. If we could slide over to slide 12.
You know,
Major-
General,
Yes, sir.
sorry to interrupt, but
Nope.
but let me take a moment to offer any public comment to folks on what we've just finished up with this morning before we get into a conversation that might lead to some drafting or considerations. So let's go to public comment on anything that we've had thus far. Is there anyone here this morning that would like to come forward? Anybody online, Heather? Okay, we've done our duty. Now we can go on to the next. We'll close public comment on that and take it away, General.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Let me introduce Major Karen Hinkle to you, who's going to walk through the first set of our interim topics, and we'll have a different presenter for most each topic. So thank you. Karen.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Major Karen Hinkle. I'm the staff judge advocate at the 153rd Airlift Wing, which is part of the Wyoming Air National Guard. And what I'm here to talk to you today is the interim topic that we've looked at in regard for state support for recruitment and retention. And as you heard General Porter discuss a minute ago, that is a pressing issue for our service. So one of the concepts that we have explored is the idea of providing essentially is kind of a referral bonus whenever we are able to successfully recruit a member. So if you were looking at slide 12, this slide puts together a bit of a chart to kind of show you the trends that we've seen in accessions and strength over the past 3 fiscal years. And the first line there is our most recent statistics. And what you can see is that the accessions are a bit lower than what you will see in fiscal years 21 and 20. And that decreases is something that we've anticipated along with the, various factors, right? A decreased propensity to serve amongst young people in particular, concerns about vaccination requirements and political issues. And so there are probably a number of factors that affect that in line, but that just gives you an idea of the current statistics that we're seeing. Any questions on this slide before I move forward?
Senator Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I looked up accessions, and there's quite a few definitions for that. How do you guys use it? I'm assuming you use it as recruitment, but maybe it's moving from other units or something like that is why you call it accessions.
Major?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator Anderson. So to clarify, that's somebody who comes into our service that's new. And so they may be prior service or coming from active duty. They may be coming from a different state and a different National Guard unit. But it really just describes when we are able to retain a new member and they have joined our unit once they've taken that enlistment, then that is the time that we consider them assessed.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I was wondering, I see the goal and the attainment. And we all know that military members have, the recruiting standards are somewhat higher. So I'm trying to get a feel for what's the likely population as you go over the fiscal years that we've had to compete with others to go after these potential recruitees.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, that's a very difficult question to answer because one of the challenges in Wyoming, and particularly for the National Guard, is that our state population is very small in contrast to every other state in the country. And that has made it challenging for us to recruit in accordance with the model that seems to be successful in surrounding states. And so we're working actively with the national level recruiting organizations and headquarters to identify ways to kind of creatively work through those challenges. But yes, I mean, it's tough because our requirements on health and physical standards and other aspects of service limit the people from which we can recruit successfully. And that adds an additional challenge. So it's out there. I don't have an answer on how we defeat that easily, but we are aware of the problem and trying to work through it. And this is one of the ideas that we've come up with to see if we can provide a little incentive to help folks who might be on the edge.
So one of the things that I'm going to ask here in a few minutes is what kind of resources we have to, to come to bear on the marketing and promotional effort. Because when I was reviewing this information for the meeting, Major, it is major, right?
Yes,
thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman, it is.
I just, having that background in my professional life, I just wondered, do we have enough resources? Are we able to target that limited population that we have in Wyoming? And that takes a lot of creativity in some circumstances, getting to places like Matitsi and Farson and Sundance, not just over here at Casper and Natrona, but so I'm going to ask that, and I'll have you be thinking about that. In the meantime, please proceed with your thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving to the next slide, what this represents is essentially the number of losses that we see in each service on an annual basis. Where this becomes challenging for us is that recruiting and developing our end strength really requires that our recruitment efforts exceed those of our losses that we get on an annual basis. And so we're actually, Major Hinkle's opinion is we're doing fairly well on that. I mean, we're always going to have some people that are leaving the service due to retirements or moving or other things that are factors outside of their control. But with these factors don't take into account losses for vaccinations, and we do know that we are going to have some of those. And so this is really just to provide some additional background on the numbers that we're working against to develop and further strengthen our overall manning. Any additional questions on this slide? Moving to the next. In regard to your question about, where can we find the best folks to come in? I mean, how do we find them? One of the creative ideas that we've come up with is really it's referrals, right? Whenever you think about kind of the face-to-face interaction and getting the experience from somebody who's doing the job and love it, like that's the most natural form of referral that we can envision. And one of the ideas that we've contemplated to kind of strengthen people's urge to do that, because we want to make sure that they don't feel like they have to be a recruiter necessarily, but they want to have an incentive to share the service, is a small monetary bonus if there is a successful session. And this is actually an idea that's been adopted in a couple other states recently. So Alabama and Vermont have recently instituted this model. I don't have a lot of information on how successful it has been yet, but it's an idea that's been out there. And in the past, we have had something similar. I believe it was called GRAP. So it's a modified version of that, and we don't have kind of the legislative proposal drafted yet. But the idea would be, if we had a $500 bonus that is assessed every time we have a recruit come in, then that is an incentive to the person who made that referral and was able to get that person into the service for completion. We've got some estimated costs based on accessions for the prior year and added a rough 10%, which we would hope to see if this was a successful program. And that gives you some ideas on the cost per biennium. If we were to do it for every recruit that we assessed, we're looking at approximately $440,000 per biennium. And if we only applied that to a referral of enlisted folks, which is where we are trying to really focus our efforts, then that does cut the cost a little bit to about $368,000.
Major, you'd have to assume in a situation like this that not 100% of these newcomers to the Guard would require that $500 stipend to somebody having recruited them. Is that right? So,
Mr. Chairman, yes. So this is, in our view, a very high figure because exactly, some people are going to just refer themselves or come from some other channel. But, we'll be optimistic and look at the high amount just for planning purposes. And this really goes with the next slide, if I may move forward to slide 15. When we kind of think about these courses of action, the first one where we're really assessing that a bonus for everybody who would come in, enlisted and officer, it is the most costly of the two options. My caution would be that while our officer strength is currently pretty good, it can be challenging to recruit skilled professionals, and the judge advocates, the doctors, the nurses, and the PAs sometimes can be a little bit more challenging, and so it does somewhat disincentivize recruitment of those professionals. But that is a smaller population that you're looking at.
let's go to Representative Baker and then Representative Stivar after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just backing up on the slide 14 that is talking about the bonus, you have the total projected costs, and it looks like you're assuming that it'll cost $1,000 per session. And is that because it'll cost $500 to process the bonus? Is that why?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, that figure is for the biennium, so we've just doubled it. It will still be $500 per individual, and then it should be, hopefully we didn't have a math error on there, but we are not accounting any costs of processing the referral bonus.
Representative Stivar. Representative Baker, any follow-up first? Go ahead, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Question I have is for these enlisted personnel that have used their college fund, and I know a few of them that have law degrees that are still enlisted, they can't move forward. Is that part of the problem of people getting out and not progressing once they get their degrees?
Go ahead, Major.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Stivar, that's a really interesting question. So one of the challenges I think that's somewhat unique to the Guard is that our ability to progress in a career does in some level, and especially as you get higher up in the service, require that there be an open position of the next rank that you can fill. And so we are always managing our personnel and other aspects of manning to ensure that we provide those opportunities as well as we can. And that's, we call it force management. So that's kind of a separate issue from this, and it may be a concern for some folks if they feel that they haven't gotten the advantage of good force management policies and they feel stuck. That can be a challenge for us to overcome. But I don't know that this is the type of solution that would necessarily address that, as it's really focused on bringing in new folks in initially. But that is an issue that we address.
Back to Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Major. Could you just briefly discuss the coordination between your efforts in the Wyoming Challenge Academy? And has there been additional discussions about maybe optimizing the dollars that have been spent towards those individuals and maybe onboarding them?
Major? Good question.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Baker. I only know about this anecdotally, and I would actually like to pass it to General Porter, if that's okay.
Okay.
Hey,
General,
Mr.
you
Chairman,
agreed.
Representative Baker, I think what you're asking is, hey, are we looking at the Cowboy Challenges potential folks to serve in the Wyoming National Guard? And the answer is yes. We do quite a bit of encouragement to have them come into the military, either the active component or to ourselves. We probably, it depends on the class, but probably anywhere from 10 to 15% of the class ultimately will come into the military in the National Guard.
Please proceed, Major.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unless there are any further questions, the recommendation from the Wyoming Military Department at this time would just be to put together draft legislation if the committee approves this as an effort to support recruiting and retention incentives. And then we would be prepared to present that probably in August.
Okay. Anything, committee? Questions? Senator
Mr. Chairman,
Anderson?
yes, so now the Wyoming Guardsmen cannot get the 500?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, that's correct. We currently don't have any sort of incentive of this type. So generally what happens is if someone is to bring in a number of successful referrals, I believe they're eligible to receive a recruiting ribbon from the state, but there's no monetary bonus that's associated with it.
So, Mr. Chairman, follow up. So the bonuses we're doing now are for Representative Henderson or Representative Burkhart to bring in a member, right? Not the Guardsmen.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, I think the intent was for the Guard members who are referring folks into the service to be eligible for the bonus. You know, we could look at if the state were interested in funding a broader program. That's certainly something that would be at the committee's discretion, but our initial intent was to make this a program that benefited the Guard members for bringing in folks.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, what resources are available now through, the DOD recruiting agencies?
Mr. Chairman, I
Or General,
probably
go
could,
ahead.
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, I could probably answer that a little bit. Representative Henderson, all the services, the DOD is starting to come alive to this discussion of how do we incentivize folks and come through. So just recently, the Air National Guard was up. They had a $3,000 enlistment bonus. The Army National Guard has instituted a $20,000 extension bonus. Those that are already in there, that if you stay, they'll give a $20,000 for an extension. Our recruiters are incentivized now to with extra dollars if they recruit more than their mission. So everybody's starting to get through this. What we were attempting to do this was mobilize those 3,000 men and women that we currently have in the National Guard to help us recruit. What we find more and more is the military is becoming a family business. Almost every enlistee that we have has some sort of relationship, familial relationship or friend relationship with somebody else, with somebody in the military. That tends to be the connection now. Fewer, in the national level, this is the fewest amount of people that serve in our national legislature that have ever served in the military. They're just not there. it's just a very small percentage. And particularly in Wyoming, where we have the F.E. Warren Air Force Base in the southeast corner, the only other place out there that's exposed to the military in the state is our National Guard men and women. So that was why we were very focused about trying to get to incentivizing those folks that know the kind of people that we want, that will be successful and are confident to bring their friends and family in. That's what we were after, sir.
Representative Baker, and then we'll go to Representative Stivart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, are there federal restrictions on what a state can offer as far as bonuses or incentivizing individuals for recruitment? General?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Baker, not that we are aware of. No, the state has the ability to provide a lot of those things on their own. Those streams don't necessarily cross, and we're aware of no restrictions of what a state can do in terms of incentivizing somebody to join their National Guard.
Representative Stivart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the individuals getting off active duty and transitioning to the Guard, how many have we got there? Because I know of one that was a Wyoming resident that enlisted in the Oregon National Guard and got a big bonus.
Mr. Chairman, you know, the Air Guard, that is their primary means of enlistment, is getting folks off of active duty through that program. That's their largest acquisition. Army Guard a little less. It's usually non-prior service, what we call the non-prior service folks. We spend a lot of time, effort, and energy with what we call the in-service recruiters, trying to leverage their willingness to send folks our way. That's interesting on Oregon and that particular bonus. That might be something I'd talk with you there, sir.
Follow up?
Follow up.
He was an infantry guy too.
Okay.
I
Representative
won't make
Baker.
any infantry jokes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just briefly, so I know that in the past and previous interms, we've discussed efforts that were done in coordinating with the state of Montana in switching some, I guess, some responsibilities. How have those impacted recruitment efforts?
Mr. Chairman, if you could tell me that again, sir, I'm not sure I understood.
Major, are you familiar with what I'm talking about? That I think in the past there were some efforts with the Montana National Guard to change duties. Is that correct?
Or mission change.
Yeah, mission change.
Mr. Chairman, you know, we had done a unit swap between the state of Alaska.
Alaska.
Yes, the state of Alaska and Wyoming, where we're going to bring a Delta Infantry Company into the state, station it in Laramie and Worland, and then our 133rd Engineer Company is going to Alaska. So that's all going to happen this fall. That stationing, we haven't completed that yet. So that's all going to happen this fall. We're in the process of stationing those units right now and getting the bed down plans for all of them. So I don't have any really good answers yet of what the effect of that's going to be, but that's the intent. We've had very good success with recruiting infantry. So we thought we'd bring another company down to try to leverage that from Alaska, but we haven't stood it up yet.
Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, General. As we move forward, and if we bring in legislation for August to go through and move forward on this, is the intent of the funding to come out of more general funding, or are you going to look at using the military fund that you currently have in order to pay for these bonuses coming out?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burt, I think it would be really up to the committee to help us do that. Our thought was general funds to be able to do that, because then if, you know, when we reach a point that, you know, the tide has turned and we don't need to continue to do this, we could go that way. But I tell you, sir, you know, I didn't put much more thought into it other than to, you know, consider different methods of funding. Certainly willing to explore that, sir. I just didn't think about different ways to do it.
Anything else, committee? General, I'm inclined to have the committee jot down their notes with regard to this recruitment and this recruitment piece, and we'll come back to it. I'm not going to take public comment until we talk about retention. So I think that's next up if I'm reading our agenda correctly. Let's get through recruitment and retention, and then committee will discuss what we may want to do about that. So take it away, Major or General.
Hey, thank you,
First
Mr.
point
Chairman.
guard on the retention piece. How about that?
Right. I think sir, we're going to go next to some state active duty reform issues. Major Maury will give us a brief to that, but we'll work around to getting the retention discussion. Come on up.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Committee. I'm Major Jackie Maury. I currently serve as the Executive Officer and Legislative Liaison to General Porter. However, in the next couple of weeks, I'll be transitioning out of that role. So as General Porter said, I think this is the last time I'll testify, at least in this near future. This is the second of 3 interim topics that we have for you that I'm going to move to. Did you want me to pause so you can have discussion on topic 1? Would you like me to press or?
Take it away. I
Okay.
think we're ready for option 2. Yeah, we reserve the right to interrupt you.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay.
We brought this topic to you as an idea for an interim session study or review, really driven by our 2020 and 2021 state active duty missions. So state active duty is the military duty that we use when we call up forces for a state mission. It is not an active military mission related to like Title 32 or Title 10 federal service. It's a uniquely state type of duty. When we activate service members, guardsmen under this authority, it's at the state level by the governor, and they become state employees. So we are fortunate in Wyoming. It's codified that our members, when they're pulled onto state active duty, are paid based on the rank that they wear and their time in service. So their paycheck looks similar to how it would if they were called to active duty under a federal authority. However, one of the unique hardships that they face is that they are not provided medical insurance. So we ask that they continue their medical coverage however they had that before. It might be TRICARE Reserve Select. It could be through their civilian employer. So we've watched other states, in particular Texas, offer a health premium reimbursement for their military members when they come on state active duty. In state statute, it's how we treat our service members under state active duty is, you can find that under state statute 19-9-403. That outlines the pay and benefits for our members when they're called to state active duty. So if we went down this route, we'd be looking to add a benefit under state code. Where we are right now is we have an estimated cost. It's a very wide range. And the reason for that is we looked at 4 years of state active duty missions. One of those years is this current fiscal year that started in October. We've only had 2 members go on state active duty this year. And we looked back 4 years. So that included 2021 and 2020 where we had COVID missions. So some years we may not use this, or we may use it for 1 or 2 service members. And other years, if we had a large scale event, it could be hundreds of service members we'd be talking about. So it's difficult to give you a hard and fast number. What we'd be asking for is that amendment to state code to add it as a benefit for our members who go on state active duty and become state of Wyoming employees, and then to plus up the funding that goes through the Wyoming Office of Homeland Security. They're the ones who pay our service members when we call them to state active duty. We owe you a lot of homework on this topic, including conversation with the Office of Homeland Security, because it does directly impact them. But we wanted to get a sense of the committee's appetite to further explore benefits for our members in this status.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Major, looking at this and looking at what healthcare premiums are currently, especially for small employers, in effect, what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that it's actually possible for someone in the Guard who's called to state active duty, based on what insurance premiums they would have to pay on their own if they have a leave of absence, that they actually lose money by serving?
Major, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that is absolutely a potential for our members. It could also happen when we call them to federal service. Some of our traditional guardsmen who drill and do annual training make less in the military than they do in their civilian capacity. And we know that when they come to state active duty, we ask them to maintain their health coverage. Wyoming, thanks to your efforts in this committee, the legislature, super military friendly, so there are protections for our state active duty members, even though they're not going in a true military status, they're coming as a state of Wyoming employee, they are protected in terms of retaining their job. However, many of our military members come from out of state. And so could be they're on TRICARE Reserve Select, as I mentioned before, we have those premiums on the slide for your review. Could be that they maintain insurance through their employer. So they return to their job after this time on state active duty and they have a debt that they owe back to their employer.
Go ahead. Follow up.
So, Major, the numbers you've given us on the slide are for an actual, say, insurance policy for them that would be a reimbursement. Am I correct?
Mr. Chairman, it's an estimate. So looking at that TRICARE Reserve Select individual premium of $46.70 a month. So it's just assuming that the member had just that level of coverage and that's what we were reimbursing their portion of the premium. So if they were using a civilian employer's plan instead, we're not accounting for that because the variety is great. It's difficult to find a number for that. In addition, we would be talking about what the individual paid, not what the employer paid.
All right, follow up.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Co-Chair.
So, Major, looking at all of this then, from what you've said, you feel you still need to do a lot of homework on this one, bring it back to us, hopefully in August with some firm recommendations. Is that the concept here?
Yes, sir. Kind of two-pronged approach, Mr. Chairman. The first one would be how we would propose revising current statute that outlines state active duty and those benefits to add this. So what that legislative ask would be. And then the second thing would be, how do we ensure that the Office of Homeland Security has the resources, the funds they need to use us when they need to without this additional benefit crippling them?
Thank
Mr. Co-Chairman?
I think I'm good now.
Okay. Questions on this front? Major, I've got one. TRICARE is an insurance company, I assume, for the military. Is that, I'm understanding that, hopefully?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
So my question, too, is have you contemplated a reimbursement to these small companies that may or may not hold our military folks on their insurance when they take a leave of absence, for example? Could there be a reimbursement to these companies?
Mr. Chairman, I think that's a valid idea and a way to encourage employers to allow us to tap in to our traditional guardsmen and bring them into a state active duty. I think that's a great idea. We did not go that far.
Yeah, okay. I just, has it been your experience, have you come to know that some of our military folks have lost the benefit? Is that because their company said, well, if you're going on military leave, then we're going to take you off of your health care benefits for the next 6 weeks? Is that really what happens here?
Mr. Chairman, I do not believe so. I think they are actually protected to have a period of time that they can continue health insurance coverage, but certainly still be responsible for their share of the premium. So they may return to the job with a debt to their employer. And so that's the bigger concern. And we did, I should have mentioned this, I failed to mention this part, but I used the TRICARE Reserve Select premiums because only our active guard and reserve, our AGR full-time members, get on TRICARE Prime. And so that's the free TRICARE that I think most of us are familiar with that the military provides. Our traditional guardsmen, the folks that come for their drill and their annual training, are eligible to participate in TRICARE Reserve Select, which has a premium. It also has an annual deductible and copays, so it operates more like a traditional health insurance. There's one group, our federal dual status technicians, so our military uniform wearers who are in we call it technician status, are not eligible for TRICARE Reserve Select. They have to participate in the federal employee health benefits plan. So as an example, in front of you are a number of different statuses. We have Mr. Smith, who's a Title V technician, General Porter, a state employee, Mr. Shepard, a state employee. I'm currently on an active guard reserve order, so me and my family are in TRICARE Prime. Major Hinkle in the back, she's a Title 32 technician, so she's not eligible for TRICARE. So for the most part, we would encourage our service members, if they're paying more than that premium, to consider moving to TRICARE Reserve Select, because it's a great deal. And so they could be using their employer, but there's probably a cheaper and better option available for them under TRICARE Reserve Select.
Appreciate all that, Major. And thank you for reminding me that there's that copay piece. All of these, as an employee, you're responsible for some of that, and they come off of duty and they owe that back to their employer. So thanks for that. That's a lot to remember for civilian committee members.
Yes,
all
sir.
of these different things that we deal with on this front. So Representative Burt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To kind of answer your question, the company that I work for, when I come to session, of course, when I'm here, I'm not getting paid for my employer. But when I take that month off or the 40 days off for session, my employer doesn't allow me to pay for my premium out of pocket. It has to come from my paycheck. So the way that mine works is the first half of the month I work pays for my premiums in the later half of the month. So if I don't work the first half of the month, then I lose my health insurance until the following month where I work the first half again. Where this can be an issue now is if we have reservists that work for the same company style that I have, where they're not allowed to pay for their premiums out of pocket. When they leave and take that leave of absence, not getting paid from the employer, they could actually lose their entire health insurance, and not just me, but my entire family. So this could be a bigger issue, with that if we're not allowed to pay those premiums out of pocket to maintain that, or it's not even a debt, I just don't have insurance anymore. So this could be a bigger issue on that.
Yeah, good points made, Representative. Thanks for
sir.
that. Anything else, committee?
Yes.
Go ahead, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I think every employer handles that differently, no doubt about it. We used to have deployments, and our insurance, we held it for a year, and we paid the premiums for our soldiers. I know a lot of people do it differently, but I know Mr. Smith's about to tell us what we need to do legally.
Mr. Smith, you've been waiting patiently. Let's get to you on this one.
Mr. Chairman, Chris Smith, the Senior Counsel for the Wyoming Military Department. Great discussion. Part of our military service member protections that we have in Title 19 includes that the employer, when someone goes on either state active duty or federal active duty, they essentially can't cut the health benefit. They can't cut benefits. Now, the member can choose to opt out during that period of time for whatever specific circumstances. But this legislature over the years has passed legislation to protect our members who serve our state and country. So I'm not saying it doesn't ever happen, but usually we can work with the employer and work it out. So that particular issue, is not a problem. Now, obviously, we're asking small employers to carry their employer contribution for people on one of these kinds of duties, which is certainly a burden to any employer, but particularly a smaller employer.
So, Mr. Smith, it kind of, in the back of my mind, says to me that we probably get into a can of worms if we start talking about reimbursing employers out across the land versus reimbursing, the employee. Is that right?
Mr. Chairman, as Major Maury said, it's legally possible, but yeah, a can of worms is a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
And you get into tax implications for the companies because they can sometimes use pre-tax dollars and all.
Well, and like Senator Anderson pointed out, you're all over the map, so
Right.
I think that would create some things. Anything for Mr. Smith or the Major? Okay, I'm going to go back to you, Major. Please, further thoughts, or please continue. Are you going to take us on to the third option, or?
I am not, sir. That's the end of my testimony. We do have a second topic for you under state active duty reform, but Mr. Smith will lead that discussion.
Okay, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Major, General, well, all of you. So I hope you've taken notes. I think we've given you some ideas and concepts to work on, to come back in August with a recommendation to the committee. That's what I would be looking for. I think the committee would also, this gives you some time to work some of those issues that are really legally and ethically sticky on how to do this and that, and I'd want to see that in August. Don't you agree, Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Co-Chairman, I like that thought, and I wonder if we shouldn't maybe consider, and you and I can talk about this, but I think we ought to consider a couple of members of the committee who might be willing to sit in with the major and work on a couple of these issues to bring back in August, because they do require a little bit of fleshing out, as the major pointed out, and so we might want to consider that, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, although it won't be Major Maury. Her successor will have to deal with all of this. Good luck.
She smiles really big when you say that, Mr.
Well, maybe she, Mr. Co-Chairman, would continue to serve as a liaison with us.
Yeah.
We haven't asked her yet.
And Mr. Chairman, just a brief privilege, please. Again,
Absolutely.
thank you, Major, for all your help to the committee, help to all of us answering our questions, taking our phone calls at bizarre hours, and that we really appreciate it. We really appreciate everything you've done in the past 2 years that I've been on the committee. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Co-Chairman, especially those late-night Senate Transportation and Military Affairs meetings on Tuesday nights, and that, so thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
We'll take that up after we look at issue 2, but I'm inclined, committee, to maybe approach it that way so that we have some input that might be helpful to our military folks, and then we come back in August with that, but would love to hear your thoughts with that. So we'll come back to that. General or Mr. Smith? Take it away.
Chairman, I do have the next one, so we're on slide 18 of your packages. This is the second issue, 2 of 2, on state active duty reform. And this one, in some ways, is much easier because it doesn't involve money. So essentially, currently in Title 19-9-402, we have a very strong provision in our state statute, essentially allowing our professionals who otherwise would have to carry malpractice insurance to not have malpractice liability while they're serving in the Guard. So if they come from another state on state active duty or federal duty, this current statute allows them to not worry about malpractice insurance and all that sort of thing. What we've come to understand when we wrote this, and I might have had a hand in that back in the day, it currently says any attorney or doctor of medicine serving as a member of the Guard. Great protection. The problem is, in today's medical community, we have far more providers who provide care than just doctors of medicine. We have physician assistants, we have nurse practitioners, we have various elevated kinds of nurses, and really we have, depending how far you want to go, we have paramedics, we have EMTs. So what we understood, this has not become an issue previously, but it was flagged from a different state. I read a situation in a different state which had a provision far different than ours, but because they didn't say all of those different medical providers, there was some discussion in a court case on whether or not liability was restricted by statute. So essentially this is fairly simple. So 19-9-402 currently says any attorney or doctor of medicine. And what we recommend to the committee to close this kind of loophole, given the kinds of people we have in our service, would be to include, instead of doctor of medicine or in addition to doctor of medicine, any licensed medical provider. Since I said that, I've done some further research, and with the committee's willingness to pursue this topic, we would draft a bill and look at this. We might want to say medical provider, because one of the interesting things is MDs, doctors of medicine, DOs, doctors of osteopathic medicine, are both considered in Wyoming doctors of medicine, so they're fine. PAs are also licensed under the same medical board. Nurses are licensed. Nurse practitioners are also often licensed, but some kinds of nurses apparently aren't. So we have a little bit more research here just to figure out what term we use in any prospective bill. But really the whole idea is to just simply expand the existing liability limitation for the folks who come to our state under either federal orders or for state active duty, so they don't have to worry about their malpractice insurance or licensing. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for the committee's questions. And with that, sir, that is the end of our state active duty reform interim topic.
Senator Anderson, go
Mr.
ahead.
Chairman, are we having the person that made the problem solve the problem?
Mr. Chairman, I'll accept that.
I think that was directed at you, Mr. Senator.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Anderson, you could look at it that way. I won't guarantee I had a hand in writing that, but the timing seems suspect.
We had to walk before we could run, right?
Sir, we took a shot at it, and now we're just going to modify it a little bit.
Committee, I'm going to allow for a quick break. We've hit a place before we go into statutory updates. That's the next step. We were going to go with a little public comment offer on everything that we've talked about on recruitment, retention, active duty reform. We had a couple of issues that were brought forward. Is there anyone here who would like to offer any public testimony on that, public comment? Is there anyone online? Heather Squared. Okay, nobody online. So we'll close public comment. We will come back to those and have a discussion about them after a 10-minute break. So let's take a break, committee, and we'll come back at 10:23. How about that? Okay.
No,
Okay, committee, let's get back to work. Just to kind of close out, we've closed public comment on retention, recruitment issues. We also, talked about a couple of issues regarding state active duty reform. I'm inclined, committee, on the recruitment and retention piece. For our military folks, I want to pursue that, and I think I kind of sense that the community does, or the committee does as well. So I think what might work well, Mr. Co-Chairman, is if we ask for a couple of volunteers on the committee to work with our military folks and with Mr. Smith in particular, with Heather, to come back to us with a couple of drafts of potential bills in August. Any comments about that, Mr. Co-Chairman? Does that sound like something we could do?
I think that's appropriate. We've talked about kind of divvying up some of the work. We have quite a bit of work. Some of it may not need legislation. But as a way to handle some of this in the coming few months. So I think that's a great idea. And I'll take another little bit of liberty here for those listening and for committee. You'll notice throughout here, we have a number of drafts that are already prepared, but they are not numbered. They have letters. And those are chairman's drafts that we requested in order to have something to talk from on some of these other issues. And that's all they are, is a discussion document. They aren't final and even near final. So we'll discuss those later, but I failed to mention that this morning on opening comments.
No, thank you for that, Mr. Co-Chairman. That's exactly our intention, was to get something on paper so we could have something in front of us and have a starting point. But regarding recruitment and retention, committee members, anybody be willing to step up and just spend a little bit of time with our military folks? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'd nominate Representative Stivar and Representative Burt. They seem to have quite a bit of knowledge about this and have been military, so they'd be good. I know they'd volunteer too.
You know, I noticed that they just raised their hand down there. Representative Stivar.
Mr. Anderson and Representative Henderson are both prior service military too, so I think them two would be great. Then we have a senator and a representative.
Yeah.
Members of the committee, this is not a tennis match.
However, Mr. Chairman, having military backgrounds, they all know better than to volunteer for anything.
You know, I think they're going to get voluntold, and I think that Representative Stivar and Representative Henderson, I've got a lot of faith in you guys, and I think if you're willing, being Laramie County electeds, sometimes that gets you in trouble, but in this case, that would put you in the neighborhood and give you the opportunity to work real closely with the military department. I don't think it's going to take a lot of time, but if you guys are willing, go ahead. Representative Stivar.
Well, we also have a retired brigadier down there that's really good at this stuff too.
He's got on-the-job experience.
We do. In deference to the fact that he chairs a couple of things, I thought maybe you guys could step up and help us out on this. I kind of see the opportunity maybe for a couple of bills. You know, the $500 stipend, I think, is an idea worth pursuing, gentlemen. And then that employer piece. You know, the fact that some of our military folks maybe lose those health care benefits. Hopefully we could come back in August at you guys' recommendation and the folks in your department, General. So let's do that, and we'll come back to that. And committee, I actually think on issue 2, Heather, I'd like to see you just go ahead and draft up what's been recommended in 19-9402, the malpractice liability piece. Committee, unless there's a different idea, I think we should draft that one up and consider that one in August to include nurse practitioners and physicians' assistants and other medical providers. So Heather, if you do that for us, I think that closes us out. Mr. Smith, any thoughts you have or anything before we move on to statutory updates?
Mr. Chairman, no, I think we're ready, except, so who just got voluntold?
You know, two of our best, Representative Stivar and Representative Henderson.
That's what I wrote down. I really just wanted to see the ping pong match
The way
continue.
they stepped forward so fast, I really appreciated those
Mr.
guys.
Chairman?
Chairman?
I will say to Representative Stiver and Representative Henderson, you know, sometimes you may want to volunteer for things early because the things that are going to get volunteered later on might be a lot more time consuming and a lot more intense.
Mr. Chairman?
Like Representative McGuire, things like gravel roads and stuff. So, okay.
I think Senator Pappas had that.
Senator Pappas.
Yes, and on that last one, the 199-402, I know when Heather does draft it up, she needs to contact Mr. Smith, because I think you've got some word changing you wanted to do, if I recall. So we can get the right terminology. in
Mr.
there.
Smith, I knew you'd
So if
be
they can do
working
it, if they
closely
can
with
tag team it.
Heather on that.
Mr. Chairman, of course.
Yeah, thanks.
Heather and I have helped write many bills. We'll make sure it works.
Okay, good deal. Thank you, Heather. Thanks, Mr. Smith, on that front. And let's move on to statutory updates. So if that's general, if that's Mr. Smith, take it away, Mr. Smith. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we're on slide 19, and this involves the Space Force, and this goes right into what Senator Pappas was mentioning. So we actually have a draft bill, but the issue is, of course, that as everyone probably knows, the Space Force was created nationally in 2019. In our code, there are various provisions that actually list the different branches of the military: the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines. So recognizing the Space Force was created, we realized we needed to update our statute. Again, kind of not a very controversial subject. So the recommendation would be for this committee to support legislation to update it. And if I may, there's actually in your package a draft bill that Heather put together and we looked at. It's I was about to say a 4-page bill, but I think it's a 3-page bill. Well, it's a 6-page bill, lines front and back. And again, it's working draft 0.2. It's Space Force Amendments is the title. And Mr. Chairman, with your leave, I'll kind of walk through it very quickly just to talk about the different kinds of provisions we're talking about.
Mr. Smith, I'm actually struggling to find that draft. I thought we had it in our packets.
Mr. Chairman, it's behind the statutory updates blue page.
Just to 6,
Item 6.
statutory updates. Right there.
Thank you, gentlemen. Okay, Mr. Smith, please proceed.
And again, I wasn't necessarily, I'll defer to Heather, but I was just going to touch on some of these provisions because literally all we're doing is adding Space Force. So at the bottom of page 1 of the draft bill is 1911-202, which really talks about signing powers of attorney and wills and stuff. And on page 2, down on line 8, you can see or the Space Force. So essentially, this provision just allows you to essentially notarize as we often do in the military. And that's all it does. So literally the first 2.5 pages are just to add or Space Force to the existing 1911-202. Then on page 3, midway down, starting on line 11, we have a provision in 20-2-205, which talks about temporary military duty. And this is in the dissolution of marriage and custody provision. And essentially, it talks about if you go on orders in the military, that can't be the basis to change a permanent custody order. You can do temporary custody and stuff. So again, we mentioned the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Marine, Coast Guard, and we're just adding Space Force. So down on line 19, that's all we're doing on that provision. And then when you flip over to page 4, we have 21-17-105, and this is a provision about the University of Wyoming, and it talks about tuition to be nearly as free as possible for some members of the uniformed services. Again, we're not changing any of the actual important part of the statute. in the definitions of what uniformed services is, we're adding Space Force. It's just that simple. On line 14 on page 4, we have 21-24-102, and this is actually the Military Child Compact that essentially was passed not too long ago by the legislature, where Wyoming joined the compact that allowed school-aged children to move into the state and have an easier time of being registered. That's all it does. So again, we want that to include Space Force members, so we added Space Force down there on line 20. And then 2 more provisions on page 5. We have 33-1-116. Many of the members of this committee will remember when this was the professional occupational licensure of military service members. And again, military service needed to be defined to include the Space Force. So down on line 8, we add Space Force. On line 13 on page 5, we have temporary permits for military spouses. Again, this is one of the initiatives this legislature did to help the military, which basically says if you move with your military spouse into the state, you can get a temporary permit for your occupation, cosmetologist, whatever it is, so that you can start working immediately and then work on getting a permanent solution with the state of Wyoming. Again, we're just saying it includes Space Force. And then finally, I lied to you, there were 3 more provisions. So on page 6, we have 42-4-120, and this talks about contracts for waiver services. And to tell you the truth, this is so far outside of my expertise. This is Medicaid. This has something to do with Medicaid. If Heather knows how to explain this better, all we're doing is adding Space Force to what a military service member is. What it actually does in Title 42, I can't tell you. But that's really the bill, Mr. Chairman, 6 pages. Heather did all of the work. I just looked at it and couldn't find anything different, so she did an excellent job. So,
Well, maybe it's appropriate that you did her work of running us through the bill. By the way, Mr. Smith, you had me at 1911-202, which is on page 1, so.
yes. Well, sir, I wanted to be complete.
You did a great job. So Heather, anything you want to add to Mr. Smith's comments regarding this draft?
Mr. Chairman, the only thing that I wanted to add is the committee is seeing a tour through the statutes from Title 19 to 20, 21, 33, and 42. And those may seem arbitrary. Why pick those? And these are the places in the statutes where the other federal branches are designated. It's not as though there's any part in statute that goes and designates one of these federal branches and defines it. These are just when they're referred to. So they're just simply being included in the list when they are referred to in statutes without adding any substantive changes. And this bill, the reason for, in addition to what Mr. Chairman said about these being XX and YY, the bills in here, is that our drafting system that numbers bills is not yet up because it has to get all the new statutes from the session in there. But this bill has been through the different various stages of review to be able to be here today. So should the committee, and this is not pressure or anything, but should the committee wish to work on this, move it forward, work the bill, even move to sponsor it, the additional thing would be just to know that even if you voted to sponsor it today, XX would turn into a number. But I don't think that would be any sort of a problem. We would just, kind of document that the committee voted to sponsor this bill as it becomes numbered or something.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Anything for Mr. Smith or Heather, Senator Anderson?
Mr. Chairman, would we ever envision a guard unit for the Space Force?
General.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, an interesting question. And I will tell you right now, there is a lot of discussion going on right now. The administration, President Biden's administration, has come out in opposition to establishing the Space National Guard. There is a couple of bills working its way through the legislature that are trying to change that. The 54 adjutants general from each of the state just sent a letter that said, hey, listen, we really think it's a bad idea not to establish a Space National Guard. This has significant effects about the way that we structure our components. Wyoming currently doesn't have any space missions. We do have a unit that in the past has been designated as a space mission, but currently right now doesn't do any space missions. There's about about 1,500 folks and about 7 states that currently have Space National Guard. The big opposition has come from an Office of Management and Budget estimate that it would take millions of dollars to change to a Space National Guard. They have since come out and said they had gotten that wrong, and our own estimates are it's about $250,000 to establish a Space National Guard, and that's changing name tapes on this. The other side of that is I think it's actually going to cost America a whole lot more money not to establish a Space National Guard. All those places where Space National Guard missions exist, those buildings, that equipment, you can't pick it up and transfer it to the active Air Force. The personnel, you can't pick up and transfer to the active Air Force. So they're going to have to build Space Force from the ground up for those missions that the Space National Guard or that the Air Force does now, that the Air National Guard does now. So a lot of discussion going on in that area. I did just brief the Codels Friday saying, hey, listen, Wyoming's not affected, but I think it has potential to affect Wyoming, and I think it's just bad for America in general to spend the tens of millions of dollars it's going to take to get that capacity and capability back up when we currently have it in the National Guard to do that. So a long answer to your very short question, sir, but it's a complicated one and one that's a lot of contention going on right now.
Mr. Chairman.
Further question? Senator Pappas?
Yeah. So mentioning that we're not in space in the Wyoming Guard, so yeah, the 153rd Command and Control Squadron, their AOR is in space. We're not considered a space asset.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, that is correct right now. They're currently lined under Global Strike Command as part of the nuclear portfolio. I could bring Chief up here if he wants to say that, but we're not a space unit as defined as it stands right now. Again, not to say, I mean, they were Space Command at one time. So if somebody reads a mission slightly different or it creeps, absolutely they could get into the space mission, I think. But right now it's not.
Anything further? Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On this, I didn't see anywhere where the Wyoming license plates where we've got the Marine, Army, Navy, Air Force. Is that in here to make a Space Force plate, or is that going to be a whole nother separate bill?
Well, that's a great question. We deal with license plates on this committee, by the way.
What?
Be there.
Mr. Chairman, in answer to Representative Stiver's question, the Veterans Commission has been working with WYDOT on a variety of license plate issues. I personally am always very loath to say the words license plates to any committee of the legislature, but it is certainly something that we can work on. It would require the creation of a plate. This was statutorily just adding the word Space Force in the appropriate place, so it is frankly, I would not want to put it in this bill because I want this bill to pass.
I think that's got individual bill written all over it, Representative.
Yes, sir. That would be my recommendation to the committee, just as.
It's got a flashing blue light back down
Also,
there by Representative Stivar. Go ahead.
Follow up on that. Since we're talking license plates, 17 states and the District of Columbia have a license plate for women veterans, and I think that should be part of this. When we do the Space Force, to have the women veterans plate in there. That's my recommendation.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Stiver, you and I have had this discussion. Would you explain the reason a little bit? I think you have very valid reasons, and I think the rest of the committee needs to hear them.
Part of it is, how do I want to put this? I'm going to irritate some people when I say this. Women, the spouses that run around saying, we serve too, they didn't serve. They did not fall under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And I think if a female veteran, like the two ladies in the back, my wife wants their own plate that says, I am a female veteran, a woman veteran, they should have that opportunity. So.
Okay, thank you, Representative. I agree with Mr. Smith. I think that probably isn't in the bounds of this particular bill, but good points made. Something that we may want to consider as we go forward. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Heather, I'd ask that you come back up because I have some questions, please.
You never
Thank
know
you.
where these bills will
Yes.
lead us.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I
So-
just was trying to go look up the, I believe it's just designated as a veteran's license plate currently, and it doesn't actually distinguish between the different,
That's correct.
the different branches of military. So that's why you didn't see Title 31 in here.
Mr. Co-Chairman, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So Heather, question on this. We've added, and I'm on page 3, right at the bottom, 22-205, Romanet 4. And we have our military service in there, and we've titled this Service Member. But we also have United States Public Health Service Commission Corps, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Commission Corps, and then we go back to our Guard and auxiliary, which I understand. So for this Public Health Service and National, well, NOAA Commission Corps, are they actually military? Or what are we doing here? Why are we singling these two out? I know it's already in statute.
Mr. Chairman,
This is a curiosity question more than anything.
Where did that existing language come from, Heather?
And I think Mr. Smith is going to help also.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely welcome the option to call a friend, phone the other end of the table here. However, I will note that Title 20 is the family statutes. And so this would be, as far as relating to the visitation. And so I think it was being inclusive of other things, and rather than being a formal military service designation, it was more people who would qualify for this particular item. However, it looks like Mr. Smith is also going to add quite a bit more.
Mr. Chairman, before Mr. Smith says anything, if you go over on the next page, it has the same information under 2117-105, the same thing under 2124-102, 33-1-116, and on and on. And I guess I'm just curious about these organizations and how we're treating them.
I had no idea that we were going to dig quite this deeply, but Mr. Smith, take it away.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman. Unfortunately, I do know a lot about this, having had to face this issue. So in the United States, the federal government recognizes service members include those two other agencies, NOAA and the Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. They are considered part of the national service. Uniformed national service is the branches of the military. Now, where that comes into play is in certain statutes. For example, under the Veterans Administration, members of the United States Public Health Service Commission Corps and NOAA actually go to the Veterans Administration if they otherwise qualify. They're considered a type of veteran because of what they do. Again, so uniformed services is a subset of services in the United States. And we face this issue because of some issues with VA benefits for public health officers. But yeah, so they really are a thing. So in the statutory provisions, as I would characterize it, the broader things like dissolution of marriage, custody agreements, those kind of things, include those two agencies as part of the services. The uniform services are a little more specific in some of the protections in some of these other statutes.
Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And a follow-up, and this might be something maybe I take as as volunteered. I guess I do have some issue with now we're giving tuition as free as possible, frankly, to the weatherman. Way I read this, and then temporary permits for military spouses. I don't know. I understand what you said, but I guess I have some issues of extending, benefits that we've tried to give to our uniformed military personnel to people that I just, nothing against these people individually or personally. I'm just not sure this is something I would want to do, but I think I'll take that offline. We'll have a discussion, and I guess I'll be a committee of one to continue that discussion.
Thank you.
We're online, but you're going to go offline?
He's
Oh,
offline.
okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. Okay. Anything further, committee, for anybody on the panel here? If not, I'd like to go to public comment on this bill. If there's anybody in the room that would like to comment on this bill? How about, Heather, anybody online? Do we have a blue hand up somewhere? Okay, we're going to close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on this bill? What do you want to do with it?
Move the bill.
Senator Anderson moved it, and Senator Pappas seconded. Discussion. Question's been called. Heather, would you take roll on working draft point 2, LSO 00 little x, little x?
Senator Anderson.
Aye. Who's got X's on them?
Senator Furphy. Senator McEwen. Senator Pappas. Representative Baker. Representative Burt. Representative Henderson. Representative McGuire. Representative Obermueller. Representative O'Hearn. Representative Romero Martinez.
Excused.
Representative Stivar. Co-Chairman Burkhart.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye.
13 aye.
Okay, we're back to you, Mr. Smith. If you want to continue on with statutory considerations.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we're on slide 20 of the package. And this was one of our interim topics. But concerning suicide and the fear to seek mental health help. We recently did a study or a couple of studies within the military department. Unfortunately, suicide continues to be a major issue in and out of the military, and particularly in the state of Wyoming. One of the concerns that was raised during some of those discussions was whether soldiers and airmen, our members, do not seek mental health help because of a fear that they're putting their military careers at risk. And that then led into what are the mandatory reporting requirements when someone comes to a provider with suicidal ideations or any kind of mental health issue. So in our study of this, the issue was raised, we added it to the interim topics. In our study of this, we discovered that there are no state statutes that address this negatively. All of the requirements, especially in the military, for reporting mental health issues of significant nature, as well as the medical provider's requirement to, if they're going to harm themselves or others, to report it, which is a universal thing. That's actually all in federal law and DOD regulation. So there's actually nothing the state legislature can do to lessen that fear because it all is based on federal law if it exists. So our recommendation at this point is no action. We'll continue to address the issue nationally as kind of trying to help the DOD come to grips with the problem of suicide in our ranks. As this committee probably has heard over the years, in my time in the military, we do much better than we ever have. We now have directors of psychological health, both in the Army Guard and the Air Guard, who are full-time professionals. All of our health folks go through extensive training on finding and identifying suicidal tendencies. We survey our force every year. They go through their physical health assessments to try to gauge how they're doing mental health-wise. Still a major problem in our society, but I don't think at this point, our purpose here, there's anything we can recommend to the committee to do in this particular area.
So, Mr. Smith, this has been you're right. One of the major topics over the past several years in front of the legislature and just for society in general. Given your review of our statutes, I wonder, I would hope you might consider sharing this with our congressional delegation back there. Our two senators, our congresswoman, just to help them understand that this does exist. There's not much we can do about it in Wyoming, but it could sure use some attention back there. Something to think about.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we'll certainly note that. I will tell the committee, you know, all of you are well aware, the military is fairly unique. I mean, we give weapons to people and tell them to go do things. So mental health is a big deal to us, and we have to be way more careful than the general society because of that nature. We have people with fingers on buttons that can cause bad things. So it is a major issue, and we certainly will raise it with our congressional delegation at the national level.
Appreciate knowing about the reporting requirement and hadn't really thought about it in that way, so appreciate that. Anything committee on this? Go ahead, Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things we can continue to do in our state is to expand broadband, particularly in some of the communities where the veterans, they really don't want to be seen going into a mental health center. But if they can participate online to a mental health center, no one knows that they're getting that support. So once again, we're working hard on expanding broadband, and we need to continue that process, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate that. Anything else? Anything else, committee? Okay, Mr. Smith, please proceed.
Thank you, sir. I feel like I'm on Jeopardy potpourri for 200. Mr. Chairman, next up, we're on slide 21. And this is an issue that came up involving state employee military leave. This is found in 1911-108. In 1911-108, subparagraph A gives all state employees of any political subdivision, municipal corporation, or any public agency 15 days of military leave within 1 calendar year. That's the existing statute. It's great. Really appreciate that the legislature did that with the support of the state executive branch. The problem here arises in subparagraph B. In this is where those kinds of state employees are allowed to go into a leave without pay status when they go into a military orders. But what's interesting about this statute is it requires them to have been employed for 1 year first. So basically during their probationary period as a new state employee, they're not allowed to go into a leave without pay status because of military orders. This has been in our statute since the 90s. I didn't write this, Senator Anderson, I know you're wondering. I don't know, I cannot find any reason why we restricted it if they're a new employee for 1 year. Most state agencies, and I've only talked to 3, they do it anyway, right? If you have a brand new state employee that's a Guard member and they get a school for 2 months, they're going to allow them to take the 15 calendar days. They can also take annual leave if they want, but then they can go into a leave without pay status. Why that's important is it hurts our military members in that first year of state employment. There are some agencies, third-hand information, that make them take all of their annual leave first and then go into a leave without pay. So they come back from this military service obligation of, let's say, a 2-month school, and they basically have had to use all their annual leave and then enter into leave without pay. So they, as a benefit of them going on their military service, they lose all their annual leave. So what we suggest here, that's the discussion. So our recommendation is to, in subsection B, to simply delete the 1 year prior employment prerequisite and allow people who are going on valid military orders for an extensive period of time, more than the 15 days they're already given, to go into a leave without pay status without lose. So essentially what it would do is mean they wouldn't lose their annual leave. And with that, I'll stand for the committee's questions. I will say, we did reach out to the A&I division. We haven't really had enough discussions yet about that. They may have a reason why this is an issue. And if so, we'll certainly report back in August, because we do want to work with them, since it's part of what they do in terms of administrating our state benefits.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Strikes me, it's kind of curious to me that an employer would not have discovered that in the process of hiring somebody. But interesting, yeah.
Well, Mr. Chairman, as you know, we have other military member protections to not allow an employer. Obviously, for a small employer hiring a Guard member, we think they bring some maturity, some additional experiences, often a lot of good training in leadership qualities to a job. But for a small employer, it clearly is harmful to them to hire a Guard member in some cases if they then have to go away for a year. So we're very sensitive to that, and we very much appreciate the employers in Wyoming supporting the military. This only deals with state employees, though, and it's a benefit that's out there. We just don't really know why it requires them to have been a state employee for at least a year first.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I said, I worked for a state agency, and we would have known that. I mean, when you hire somebody and you'd say, well, we'll hire you, but we're not going to let you go to the Guard duty. But anyway, anything else?
Well, Mr. Chairman, the only thing I'll say about that is they don't have a choice. We make them go to Guard duty. They're called orders for a reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, we'll come back to this one, please. I tell you what, we've got public comment listed on each one of these. I think that we will go to public comment after the next 3 bullet items. So please know that we will do that. If somebody's out there and wanting to visit with us about any of these issues, let's work our way on through these. Mr. Smith, if you would. Representative Henderson has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just really want to clarify my understanding. There has to be an accrual or earning piece of this in terms of developing your eligibility. So my question is, when someone's called up to duty, does that stop their private, or their, in this case, public employer calculation of earned leave or paid time off?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Henderson, in our military protection acts, the employer generally is supposed to keep them in the same place they would have been if they hadn't gone on military duty. So I know for state employees, it does continue to accrue even though they're in a leave without pay status or a non-pay status. They still do get some accruals. Individual employers, they're supposed to do something like that, but I'd have to look at each individual situation.
All right.
And Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Shepard's up on the next one.
Oh, okay. Let's hand that baton over to Director Shepard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Tim Shepard, Executive Director for the Wyoming Veterans Commission. Hopefully this one will go fairly quickly. This is all about a veteran who came forward and was concerned about the property tax exemption and that it's offered to an exclusive pool of veterans, which was the intent of the legislation, that it be an exclusive pool. And so his thought was, why isn't it inclusive? And so he's really talking about, for the most part, our traditional guardsmen who don't deploy, then who aren't eligible unless they are deemed disabled by the VA. So basically, this comes down to one, the intent. I believe the intent of the legislation was that it be exclusive, specifically for combat and disabled veterans. Two, right now, we look at about 14.9 million for the biennium. I think that number is going to go up just because our veteran population is going up, which is a good thing for Wyoming. But obviously, that means more veterans will be eligible for this benefit. And we think to do this, you probably would have to double the amount of money that's out there for the exemption. The other thing that I worry about is, I mean, as you all recall, it's not that long ago that the Joint Appropriations Committee targeted this program as one to potentially cut back from its current standing. So, there's that issue too. And again, I would go back to, this came forward from one veteran. Now, I can tell you that for the Veterans Commission, when we went down this road a couple of years ago, we did quite a bit of sensing of, hey, where do we want to be as a community? And what we agreed to was, well, we don't think that these exemptions should be reduced. We think we should stand fast right where we are, but we also wouldn't ask for any type of an increase to the benefit. So my recommendation, and the recommendation that we have for you, is that allow the Veterans Commission to study this further, find out what is the sense of the veterans community, and come back to you with that recommendation.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I want to make sure everybody's clear on this $3,000 annual property tax exemption. It is not a tax exemption. It's an assessed tax calculation. You do not get $3,000 annual property tax exemption. And I think if you read that like it's written here, you'd think you had $3,000 off your property tax, but actually it's just off the assessed valuation. The other question I have, I had a questionnaire from somebody, and I can't remember who it was, an individual group asking if, as a veteran that's covered, if we would give half of our exemption for the other veterans that aren't covered. And I said I would. It really doesn't make that much difference in your property taxes. So I don't know how that fits for everybody, but I know quite a few of them said no to that. But anyway, thank you.
So, Director Shepard, just real quickly to follow up. Well, let's go to Representative Stuyvesant first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This just says property tax, but you can also use this exemption on license plates. I think it's $80 or $90 off your plates. So how's that going to affect? Is this just for the property tax? Or does it cover both?
Go ahead, Mr. Smith.
Chairman, Representative Stiver, our estimate is based on both, because you can only use it one or the other. It's the veteran's choice who qualifies. You can use it against your property tax or against your ad valorem tax for your car or one vehicle. And so
One on
just
vehicle,
one,
and then the other one, my wife's on the property.
right? Well, two different veterans, so you can
Yeah.
use your own thing. But as Senator Anderson said, it's $3,000 of value, so it ends up being somewhere between $80 and a little less than $200, depending on the tax rate in your county.
And that is something, committee that the state reimburses our counties for, just to clarify that. Director Shepard, I'm struggling with the numbers at the bottom of the slide. Can you explain that again to me? It looks like it's costing $14.9 million per biennium. And we anticipate if we were to move to those who had not been deployed and include them in the pool, we're going to double that amount?
That, Mr. Chairman, that's our estimate, that basically about half of our veteran population right now qualifies. So if you were to make it inclusive, the argument is, well, then that's twice as many.
Thank you for that. Okay, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just a clarification for the committee, it's up to $3,000, as we said, and it's up to the veteran to apply for it. Not all veterans even know this exists. And the thing is it's not freebie money, so to speak, but this is what the county loses, and the state reimburses the county to keep the counties whole on their property taxes. So there's no real free pot of money out there to do this. I remember some of the very robust floor discussions on this because they come up about every 2-3 years on this. And I was on appropriations when appropriations looked at this and decided we're best leaving it as is. We won't expand it and we won't reduce it. But I think, and Mr. Shepard, you can correct me if I'm wrong, please. I think that the average benefit that a veteran gets or accepts is less than $2,000 a year on the average. It's not close to 3,000. Am I correct?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, committee, anything else? Representative Burt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, do you know of a reason why the award for the exemption was limited to the way it is, whether it's a certain conflict? And, you know, it's expanded after Vietnam, obviously, to get into the armed forces medals or those awards for those that are deployed. Is there a reason why, and maybe, if you don't know, you don't know, on why it originally wasn't put out there for all veterans, if it was just limited for those that, on those specific cases? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burt, great question. This is actually one of the oldest existing statutes still in our statute books. This goes all the way back to the 1890s. And originally it was the Spanish-American War, the Indian Wars, and I think it was a benefit that the legislature did for those people who actually fought in the country's wars. What we did several years ago now is, because of the different conflicts after the Vietnam War, we expanded it only in the sense of saying you had to have an expeditionary medal or something that says you went forward overseas to a combat environment, really to give what the original legislative intent was: combat veterans. There was a subgroup of veterans that the legislature chose to give a little bit of a monetary benefit. And as I mentioned before, the benefit is less than $200 per person. It's just we have a lot of veterans who qualify, and that's where you get that $14.9 million biennial amount. But that's my understanding. Don't know what they were thinking back in the late 1800s, but the way they originally did it. And then over the years, the legislature added different conflicts. And we finally, several years ago, decided to do the expeditionary medal so the legislature didn't have to keep going back and modifying it for each conflict after they occurred.
Representative Vogelmuller.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just based on the testimony about the dollar value of these benefits and the number of veterans we have, I'm just having a hard time coming up with a scenario that generates $14 million. So I'm not asking that you present that today, but maybe for the next meeting, show us how these numbers are actually calculated. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Representative Burt, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a follow-up on that, just for full disclosure, I do receive this, and I'm within that $200 range. So it's not a large chunk of money out of my property taxes. I guess one of the questions I look at is the unintended consequences. When you look at it, a lot of the deployed benefits that veterans get with that armed force, that overseas medal, if we open it up to, say, this particular property exemption, will we see something come down the line of anything else, that any other benefits that are received as veterans attached to those overseas medals that could down the line come out? I don't have an example off the top of my head, but there are others that we receive.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burt, yeah, I can't think of any either. This is a specific state benefit that the state of Wyoming has been nice enough to give combat veterans or those who are disabled, and that's the thing we can't forget. yeah, I can't think if it would have any unintended consequence, so to speak.
Yeah. Representative Burt, I don't know if we adequately answered your question as to why all veterans were not included, but having served on the Transportation Military Affairs Committee years ago, and then subsequent to that, serving on appropriations, a lot of conversations about what we can really afford to do. And so it really, I think, came down mostly to that, which is, we think that, you know, we maybe can't do it for everybody, but we can certainly recognize, you know, some of our veterans this way. And so I have no problem, Director, with the commission continuing to take a look at this. And I think our committee would be interested in what the veterans tell you. You know, you might learn some things that we haven't thought of today. So I would say a thumbs up on continuing that conversation. We look forward to you reporting back to us.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Looks like we got at least one more. Mr. Smith, is this back to you?
I was going to let Mr. Shepard do this one too.
I've got this one, Mr. Chairman.
Trying to share the wealth.
Shepard,
So.
my guy.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to bounce away from you there.
Right, I hope this one's fairly quick. So this is all about the V designation on the driver's license. And what we have in the current legislation is that basically it's a three-step process. The veteran goes into the driver's license office and requests to get the V designation. The veteran then comes to the commission for us to verify that they are indeed a veteran who's qualified for the designation. Then the veteran goes back to the driver's license office and gets the designation of veteran on their driver's license. So in discussion with Director Reiner and his folks over at Department of Transportation, we asked the question, would it be possible to take this from a three-step process to a one-step process? Because we already know that a lot of, that your driver's license folks already look at a lot of different designations and the criteria behind them and make that decision. And we think it's a relatively simple one when you look at the DD, basically what you have to do is look at a DD 214 and see the characterization of service. And so if their characterization of service is honorable, they qualify to have this V designation. And the Department of Transportation felt, yeah, it's very easy for them to add that. We would be their backfall if they have an issue where they're not exactly sure. Hey, so we've got one. For example, some of the copies of the DD 214 cut off the characterization of service. That makes it obviously a little bit tougher. They can reach back to us. We can look at the 214 and determine what that would be and help them with that. Also, we would make sure that they understood the different 214s that have been produced over time and where to look for the characterization of service. So again, they're comfortable that they could do that. To make this change, again, we would make this go from a three-step process to a one-step process. And I think still accomplish the same thing.
Okay. Thank you, Director. Any questions for the Director? Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I applaud the three-step to one-step. That really does make a difference, and I don't see why they can't ask for the DD 214 right there. I just got my new driver's license, and instead of the V, it says veteran on it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was kind of surprised when I got it, which either one would be all right, I think, but maybe some veterans have told me that when they present that in other states, the V, they don't believe the V.
Is for veteran.
So is for veteran, yeah. So maybe the written out veteran is better.
You know, I'm going to see if Mr. Rossetti's willing to come forward to the front row and, you know, just to verify or underscore that you feel like your troops can do this, apparently, Mr. Rossetti. So,
Mr. Chairman, Taylor Rossetti, Support Services Administrator at WYDOT, and as Director Shepard mentioned, there are various ways that we can do this without having to do this three-step process. I think really the proposed here to get rid of the certification, I think is a decision that you guys can make. I think we are generally supportive of it. I think that the way that you verify the veteran status, the language in the license plate is probably pretty clean to use here too. It's basically just verification of honorable discharge. So if you change the section that Director Shepard mentioned here on his slide to something similar to that, I think it does exactly what Director Shepard mentioned. We're comfortable taking the DD-214 at the counter, making that decision. We've also, in examples where a DD-214 might have been cropped incorrectly, if that individual also has a veteran's license plate, we can look in that in RIS and we'll say that, hey, we verified this for their license plate and we'll just grant it on the driver's license. So I think this works for the driver's license. It also works for the ID cards for individuals that do not drive. I think it's a simple change. It's definitely more efficient to operate this way. And then, Mr. Chairman, to get back to Senator Anderson's question about the change from the V to the veteran, we did do that change back in 2019 when we redesigned the cards, and that was really due to feedback from the veteran community in that the V wasn't as widely recognized, and that was an opportunity to actually add a veteran. And the language in the statute says that it has to have a V. We felt that V was part of veteran, and we were still basically holding true to your guys' intent. So with that, I'd certainly stand for any questions.
so just outside the bounds of that statute, but still on the playing surface. So, Mr. Rossetti, this would take legislative action, wouldn't it? We'd have to modify that statute.
Mr. Chairman, I believe it would, just based on the way that is worded in statute. It requires a certification from the Wyoming Veterans Commission, and I think the proposal would be to change that to just verification of honorable discharge or whatever language you guys choose.
Might give us an opportunity to fix that V to a veteran in there too.
I think we could certainly work with you on that as well if you'd like.
Well, it sounds like we kind of already did that, but we'll just put it in the statute anyway, so.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
if I may,
Mr. Smith.
we didn't get the slides updated. I recognize Heather Jarvis actually brought up, we need to change both 111 and 141. They both, 141, one of them says you can have a veteran, the other one says what the process is. So there is actually two statutory provisions. I just want to bring it up to the committee's attention.
Yeah, we kind of count on Heather for a lot of things, but I'm thinking that she probably is going to get an opportunity to draft a little something up on this, but we'll come back to that, Heather. Anything else, committee, on this one? And anything further, Mr. Smith, on statutory considerations? General?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think that brings to a close.
Okay, General, unless there's any other comments from you or Director Shepard, we're going to go to public comment. And I would ask for any public comment on state employee military leave, veteran designation for property tax exemptions, veteran designation on the driver's license or an identification card, or anything else that we have talked about this morning. So any public comment in the room? Would anyone like to come forward? Okay, do we have any blue hands up on? Okay, I'm going to close public comment. Committee, let's back up and go through these bullet points. I'd be interested, Mr. Co-Chairman, in what the committee's thoughts are. State employee military leave. Seems to me like we should maybe encourage a draft bill on that one. Do you want to offer any thoughts on that, Mr. Chairman, or any of the other bullet points?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've made some notes. That's one of mine, was a potential bill on that leave issue, and I have some other notes too. So, and yeah, this is a good place to take care of it, and then we aren't sitting here tomorrow afternoon trying to remember what we did.
Yeah.
So I think what I have is, and I'm gonna get on the list I have. For August is the insurance premium issue. Either have a draft bill ready or some sort of response to the committee. And Heather, if I go too fast, stop me. We're probably looking at a bill on the referral bonus. We need to do some statute changes, I think. The medical malpractice issue. These are all relatively short bills, I think, Mr. Co-Chair. The annual leave issue, and then this last one, the veterans designation on the driver's license. So I think we potentially are looking at, we already passed one bill through, we're looking at potentially 5 more. And I think we need to probably, thinking ahead, we may need to prioritize these. Just, that would already give us 6 bills if all of these go through committee. With we had 19 bills last session, and I think that was too many.
Well, yeah, and that's why they pay us the really big dollars, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Mr.
No, I
Chairman?
think, committee, go ahead, Senator Pappas.
I do think we ought to go ahead and have bill drafts for all of these topics that we've discussed. And so if the committee, if we could just take them all, unless somebody wants to pull one out, I would move for drafting a bill on each one of the items that the co-chair just enumerated.
I think that's a great way to handle it. We've got a motion on the floor and a second. All those in favor of that, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? The way that's going to work in August and further, committee, is that we can take a look at these 6. The committee may not decide to carry them all. And if that's the case, we've got individuals on the committee who can certainly step up and carry them. But I think we need to look at them. And we've got a couple of members who are going to take a closer look at the recruitment and retention piece, which involves 2 bills. And so, thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I think we can move on at this point. Gentlemen, unless you have anything else for us, General, thanks for everything this morning. Appreciate it.
And Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you. Sir, I think I would only, just to make sure that I'm tracking, I sensed a willingness from the chairman and the committee to be of assistance in this recruiting and retention piece of of where we've got going. We definitely only focused on the referrals and the recruiting piece of this and this. If the committee's willing, and if I misread you, please just kick me back in bounds. We could also look at a couple of retention sort of ideas when we come back in August. Potentially, reestablishing some of the money that we had to take away for our education programs in the past, maybe reemphasizing that, maybe potentially being able to will some of, if a person wasn't able to use their education benefit to a spouse or child, something along those things. If the committee's willing to look at it, we would do the brain work to provide some information back to you along those lines. If I misunderstood that, sir, my apologies, and we'll stay with just the incentive part of that. But I did want to make clear that perhaps I have an opportunity here that may not exist in the future. So,
General, I like that. I think if you would bring that back to the committee, I think it would be informative. I would ask another piece of that, backing up to the recruitment piece. You might recall that I brought up the issue of, what resources do we have available to ourselves to go out there and market, for young people to join our Guard. And, I think the committee would like to look at, are we doing everything on the front end that we can? What resources do you have? Where do they come from? And, maybe there's an opportunity for us to step in and help in some way there. So
yes, sir.
If you two-prong that for us, I think that might be really helpful to the committee.
I will do, sir. Will do.
Okay.
Just one more thing to check out. I want to make sure that I captured some of the requests for information, and I didn't do as good a job this time, but I believe Representative Obermuller wanted to break down of the property tax exemption, what that $14 million looks like and where it comes from on that. Was there any additional information from the committee that we need to do some research on other than that maybe I missed?
Committee, anything for the general that you'd like to see come back? Heather?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there was one more item, and that was the staffing from the Department of Health regarding the Veterans Skilled Nursing Facility.
Oh, thank you, Heather. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate it. Okay. Gentlemen, really appreciate it. Thanks for all your efforts.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Co-Chairman.
General, one thing I would request on that staffing issue is to, if you would, talk to Commissioner Novotny up in Johnson County. They've done a lot of work on that already. They have a plan that appears to be working, so I would say they can probably give you all that information you need without you doing much of anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that.
So, and one last thing, Mr. Chairman, is that on all the other issues you've talked about, the concepts and that, if you need help from any member of the committee, feel free to call them. I'll volunteer all of us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee for everything today and your continued support of our men and women that serve. And it's incredible, and I just want to tell you thank you on behalf of all of the members of the Wyoming National Guard.
Good to see you again, General. Thank you. Mr. Smith, Director Shepard, thanks for all you're doing. Enjoyed the morning. Thanks. Committee, we're going to move on to a little presentation. This is something that I ran into a few weeks ago and thought it might be very informative for our committee. And so we're going to talk a little bit about Project Kenny. And I'm looking to the back of the room. We've got somebody here that I think can come forward.
Might want to ask them to stay for this presentation. Ask the military people to stay for this presentation if they wish.
So, Mr. Smith, General, all the military folks, I hope you can stay for this presentation. So appreciate you being here this morning. Please, some of us know who you are, but please state your name and a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I am Carol Salveson, and I'm a dog trainer for Project Kenny. And I also have, closer?
A little closer.
Okay, how's that?
Broadcast
I'm Carol
voice.
Salveson with Project Kenny, and I train service dogs for veterans with post-traumatic stress. Joining us by Zoom is our Executive Director, Eric Koivisto, and with your permission, we'll also add him. Is that okay, sir?
And it's pronounced Koivisto?
Koivisto.
Koivisto.
I'll let you introduce yourself.
Eric, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks for your time today, Chairman and members of the committee. Really appreciate it. I'm a retired Special Forces warrant officer, and currently we've been building Project Kenny since 2018. So started with 3 dogs, and now we've got a complete facility. Hopefully that helps if everybody can hear me all right.
You're coming through loud and clear, Director, so please continue any thoughts you have, and then we can come back to Carol. How's that work?
Yeah, I'll pass it back to Carol. That's perfect.
Okay. And so when I met Senator Landon, I so appreciate you inviting me. I asked him, spread the word on what we're doing, because I've been doing this for 5 years, and I bet none of you, well, most of you have probably not heard of us. Am I correct? And so I'll say I'm pretty good at training dogs, not so good at getting the word out. What do? We train service dogs for veterans. We start from start to, are you putting slides up? Do we have the slides
do we
up?
have?
Or you guys have the handouts?
Do we have, I think we have handouts.
Okay, so the next slide, what do we do?
Mr.
We start dogs from puppies generally about 8 weeks, and we train them to they're fully trained 1.5 to 2 years. This is Atlas. He is about 1 year. He has another 6 months to go. We also help veterans in the local area train their own dogs to be service dogs if it's a suitable dog. And the way that works is they come into me for a private lesson once a week, and then they have a group lesson once a week. Usually takes 6 months to 1 year to do that. The other thing we've done, I think you guys may have had a chance to meet Swede up at the Veterans Home. Did you get to meet Swede, the facility dog up there? Oh, that's too bad. He's a Bernedoodle. And Project Kenny bought Bert the puppy to be a facility dog up there. And we started training, and then a veteran up there took the dog on. And so this Bernedoodle goes there every day to visit the veterans, and they absolutely love them. We are going up for therapy dog work once a week, and that's a long drive up to Buffalo. And so the facility dog was a great thing. We also just provided a therapy dog down to Nevada to assist military sexual trauma survivors. The counselor is a survivor of military sexual trauma, and she counsels all day long victims of military sexual trauma.
So Carol, real quickly, let me just allow you to catch your breath for a minute. So this Bernedoodle, was he a dog that they had and then they brought him to you, or is this a Bernedoodle you came up with and offered to them?
So we talked to them about providing a facility dog, and there's a veteran up there. It's actually going to be a dual trained service and facility dog, and he really wanted a Bernedoodle. And so Project Kenny found one. We found a puppy, and we started the training for it. We bought it for him, and then we handed it over.
So when you, there's so many questions, but so when you went out and purchased this little Bernedoodle, where did you get the funds to do that? You're a nonprofit, maybe a 501 or whatever?
We are a nonprofit 501c3. Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Please continue. Any questions, Mr. Co-Chairman?
Carol, what is a Bernedoodle? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Bernese Mountain Dog and Poodle. Yeah, so it's hypoallergenic. So we really wanted something hypoallergenic that everybody would be able to get close to this dog. Some people
And
are
those who
allergic to
don't know
dogs.
the mountain breed, they're big, right?
He's
So-
going to be about 120 pounds.
Yeah, he's a big guy, I
Yes.
bet. So, yeah. Oh, please continue.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
Great.
And so part of our mission statement does not include first responders, but I think that's very important. If a first responder comes to us, I will help them personally. And I'm going to address that a little bit farther later on. So we've been around for right around almost 5 years. And it started out pretty much with a dozen dogs in my house. My husband's a saint. In December, we got a facility for the first time. And so.
And where's your facility located?
In Mills.
Oh, it's out in Mills, okay.
Yes, sir. And so far, we placed over 30 dogs with veterans in the short time. And like I said, we're a very small nonprofit. I have a wonderful woman that helps me train, but it's pretty much the two of us doing all the training. Anything you want to add, Eric?
Yeah, I would like to add that it's our organization is 100% volunteer. So as we solicit donations and move through kind of the business side of it, we have volunteers from kind of around the U.S. that help Carol. Carol's obviously our backbone and heart and soul of the organization, but we have a lot of folks that help from California, Seattle, and help out and volunteer when they can. We don't have any paid employees, so it really is able to focus directly on the veterans and getting the dogs trained for the veterans.
And I think that's an important point. So I'll get back to that. The statistics is on the next page. You guys can read. You guys know the statistics. I'm not going to go over them. But I think that the last one about the first responders is a recent thing from University of Wyoming, that they believe that the suicide rate among first responders is higher than it is among veterans. And I think you know that locally we've had a few incidents, and that's heartbreaking. I think there's still that stigma, and trying to get our first responders to push past that stigma and ask for help. Our veterans are getting there. I think our first responders still are not. And this is where you guys can really help us. Senator Landon asked specifically why I do this. Of course, everyone on the board has their own reasons, but for me personally, my son died by suicide. He was a decorated Green Beret, and he loved the dogs. If you look at the pictures, one of the pictures is one of the Afghan dogs that he raised from a puppy over there, and he wanted to bring it home. It was Bear. And then another picture is him in the Philippines with a dog. I love dogs. He loved dogs. When I lost him, how can I help? And it was to honor his memory through the dogs. I'm good with dogs, not so great with people. This is really intimidating, by the way.
You're doing a wonderful job.
Thank
Doing
you.
it. This is terrific. Go ahead.
And then back to Project Kinney. Most of our board is actually out in the Seattle area. And you say, how did I get associated with a nonprofit from Seattle? Eric was actually in the same group as my son, and a mutual friend connected us. Project Kinney started with the idea that they wanted to help veterans somehow using dogs, almost at the exact same time that I started training dogs. A mutual friend connected us, and it's just been a wonderful match because half the board is veterans. I'm a veteran, by the way. I'm retired Air Force. And then the other half is very bright businessmen. Not that our veterans aren't intelligent too, Eric. You're also very bright. But the combination has been awesome. We have a great organization. And so I get a lot of the visibility because I hand over the dogs, but the board is absolutely incredible. Why a service dog? A service dog doesn't cure post-traumatic stress. It helps them get through it. We always encourage our veterans to continue counseling, therapy. The dog just helps them get through it. The girl that helps me train, I was talking with her this morning about my presentation. I practiced on her, and she thought it was so important that I share with you. She has post-traumatic stress, and she has a service dog. She says, her hope, our hope, is that the dog saves lives. She says, at that moment, the dog doesn't cure PTSD. She says, but at that moment, when you're considering suicide, the dog can break that thought. And she knows that from experience. And I think that's so powerful to share her story. And I put down, the VA recently did a large study, and I put that statistic in there again. I'm not going to read you all this stuff. You guys can read. How do we train our dogs? Generally, for a dog from start to finish, takes 1.5 years. With our more difficult, stubborn dogs, I had a giant schnauzer. Took me 2 years for that one. They have to be able to work in all environments. We use a positive training. As you can see, I brought my treats. Very positive training methods. We want there to be a strong relationship. We don't want it to be fear-based, and that is very research-based, that using fear methods, using choke chains, e-collars, does not result in a strong environment, strong relationship. What do? I'm going to stand up for a second and step away from the mic. I'm going to show you how Atlas interrupts anxiety. Every dog has their own method. Sometimes dogs will touch. Sometimes dogs will use their nose. Atlas has a very strong anxiety interruption. Let me see if I can get this lazy dog up. Atlas, here. And so typically our veterans have signs of anxiety, and they'll shake their legs, or they will, good dog, yes, or they'll clench their hands. Our dogs are trained to interrupt nightmares. They're trained to interrupt those signs of anxiety. So I had one veteran that went in Menards, and it took him 5 hours. His workplace sent him there for a few pieces of stuff. It took him 5 hours to get the pieces because he couldn't get over the anxiety. So having this dog, as our veterans tell me, the dog grounds them. So when they get into that level of anxiety and the dog jumps on them, it brings them back to earth and grounds them. On the next slide, if you look at your slides, what our veterans say, again, I'm not going to read those comments, but it just talks a little bit about what our veterans say about our service dogs. How's the volume? Am I okay? Where we train and what we do. I mentioned that we just got our training facility in Mills, but it goes way beyond that. It's so important for our dogs to go in the community. Having Atlas here is great training for Atlas. You probably heard him out there when we first got here, and I apologize for that. But again, it's a service dog in training. My dogs go to church with me. We take them in all the stores. As you know, Wyoming does not have a law for service dogs in training to access facilities. But Casper is absolutely amazing. There's actually only one place in town that has told me I could not bring in my service dog in training. Everywhere else, because we don't have the rights, I ask. Smith's, can I bring my service dog in training? Yes. The movie theater, yes. The coffee shops. So Casper's absolutely wonderful to train service dogs here. Eric, if I could have you talk about the key members.
Yep. Are you on that slide?
They have the handouts.
Okay, great. So this started, and Carol was being a little bit nice early on, but we were trying to help. Matt Sorey and I were meeting in Seattle and trying to help veterans. And figure out what we could do. He wanted to just initially give a donation. So as we started talking a little bit more about it and what's the next steps, as Carol alluded to, a mutual friend had gone to Bobby's funeral and provided the introduction. Well, we didn't really have a clue on what we were doing. And Carol just said, okay, my first 3 dogs are for you. So really she gave us a kick in the rear end and got us moving. And so from there, that's where we are now. So Matt Sorey and I founded this just trying to figure out how we could help veterans. He's a business leader in Seattle and just has a heart of gold for the veteran community. You obviously know Carol. And Joey he also works for Matt. He is our treasurer and just a brain with making sure that we stay on the up and up. All our books are open. So there's nothing missing when we look at our books. James Kane is a lawyer down in San Diego, also a heart of gold. And he does make sure all of our stuff is legal and we're above board. And then finally, Kate, our secretary, she is one of our first recipients of a dog. She was actually not shot in combat, but she was at I think a Denny's in Nevada where a gunman shot up the Denny's and she lost some of her teammates and she was shot there as well. So she's still having health issues, PTS issues, and she's really came from a very shy person to being outgoing and secretary and became our grant writer. It's been amazing to see what the dog has done for her. And then other volunteers we have that are not listed, but Brian Guzman, another Special Forces veteran. And I think that's everybody.
And the other thing I want to mention about Kate had applied to service dogs with other organizations, and they turned her down because she hadn't been to war. We're a very small organization, and once Eric's the one that pairs the veteran with the dog, and once he heard that story, it was absolutely a given that she needed a dog. And so that's one of the benefits of being small and having somebody who knows and can really weed out the ones that really need a service dog. And Eric is awesome at that. Where are we headed? And again, this is where I'm hoping you guys can help me. My reach has pretty much been Casper, and I've had several veterans come to me for help with service dogs. All our services are free, by the way. We charge for nothing. And so I want to reach out past Casper. Anybody that's willing to drive to Casper, even just once a month, I will help them train their service dog. And so that's one of the things you guys can really help with me with. Assistance dog international certification is something we're working towards. Once it's a 3-year process, but if we can get that, then our veterans that get service dogs will have veterinary bills. The VA may cover their veterinary bills, and that's pretty important. We're all volunteers, as Eric mentioned, but we'd also like to, eventually, I'm not getting any younger, eventually we will need to bring on a full-time trainer and probably have to pay them. I'm fortunate that I'm in a position where I can do this full-time, and I'm very grateful to God for that I can do this. This has been my therapy, as you can imagine. Sometimes I feel bad our veterans only get 1 dog, but I have a dozen. A breeding program, we want to start our own breeding program so that we can breed for the specific traits. It's heartbreaking when I have to wash a dog out because it doesn't have the right temperaments. And a permanent training facility. We just got a wonderful building and we have a 5-year lease, but again, looking long-term, we would like to have our own training facility. I talked a lot about this, how you can help. I really think I already talked on all of those points, except for the PAWS Act is a great thing that's happening at the federal level. And if that goes through, it's in a pilot program right now. I don't know how much impact you guys can have on that, but that would be wonderful if that went through. I know it's right before lunch, and so I didn't want to keep you. I know you guys are hungry. So I so appreciate you giving us this bit of time. And so before I ask for questions, Eric, do you have any closing comments?
No, I really just want to say thank you for your time. It is absolutely wonderful that we get this forum to be able to discuss our project and how we're trying to help a veteran one at a time. We're small, we plan to stay small, but I think we're making a pretty big impact for a small organization. So thank you so much, all of you, for your time.
Yes, thank you. Any
Eric,
questions?
I want to thank you for, obviously, for getting this whole thing started and beginning to reach out across the country and finding people like Carol. That's pretty cool that we've got this going on.
Thank you.
So, Carol, you were concerned about coming in front of the committee, and it was terrific. You did a great job.
Thank
So,
you. Thank
Committee,
you, sir.
any questions? Representative Burke?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Carol, for coming in. If you mentioned it and I missed it, I apologize, but what does it actually, I mean, I understand it's free for the veterans you give it to, but what is the actual financial cost to train one dog?
$20,000. Yeah, veterinary bills, food, so when we put that $20,000 figure, if I was paid, and when I was training out, well, now we do have a facility. So facility costs and training costs, yeah, 20,000.
Any other questions? Mr. Co-Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Director Shepard, you're still here, so you get a question. Thank you. So
Thank you, sir.
So, Director, is there an opportunity for the Veterans Commission to work with Project Kenny? Or are you already working with them? I'm just curious.
Mr. Chairman, we are not presently, but I did just give her a card because I see a lot of value in this. And if nothing else, our ability through our network of veterans to share the word on this great program and to offer it up to veterans. I think there's tremendous potential.
Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
And Director, I'm not, and Carol, you also, familiar with all the benefits. Is there a veterans benefit to, does the VA pay for a service dog or give a veteran the opportunity to obtain a service dog?
Not for post-traumatic stress.
Okay.
That's that pilot program is the pause. They will for mobility. I think it's fairly recently that they even started letters of recommendation for a service dog for post-traumatic stress. So the VA is getting there.
So
Carol, if I could add to that, or sir, if I could add to that real quick, that's been one of the difficulties with the VA. It's been different across the country. Different VAs kind of interpret the rules a little bit different. And and PTS isn't necessarily recognized as a military kind of symptom for a dog. So we're definitely hopeful that the PAWS Act will kind of go down that road and start being able to help as a treatment method that the VA would pay for in the future.
Thank you for that, Eric. Go ahead, Mr. Co-Chairman.
Follow up. So, so this committee, in effect, contacting our congressional delegation, asking for their support on that act would be some help. Am I correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else, committee? Carol, I want to thank you for coming today. It was a real delight to find out what you're up to, and on behalf of the committee, thank you for what you're doing. And I'm excited that Director Shepard and those gentlemen and ladies behind you in the military will be able to share the word. And I'm going to get out and see where you do this.
Okay.
We'll come visit. So
love to have you. And thank you again for inviting me. Thank all of you.
You're welcome, Carol.
Yes,
Thank
have a
you
great
very
lunch.
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Eric.
Committee, we're done for lunch. We probably on Project Kenny, I guess we could do some, I wasn't thinking that. It was just just kind of an informational thing, and so I don't think we need to, Mr. Co-Chairman. I think we're going to try to have a quick lunch hour, committee, because as you can see, we've got a lot of things on the agenda this afternoon. So let's come back at 1:15. We'll squeeze a little more time. Heather.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to note that Director Shepard has some additional information about the Oregon Trail Veterans Cemetery that he was going to hand out to y'all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Director. If you do that, and